Welcome to today's meeting of the Children and Family Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Alan Lamb. I represent the Wetherby Ward and I'm the chair of the board. Firstly, sincere apologies for the late start, which is not our usual habit, but we had a particularly enthusiastic pre-meeting in advance. So I'm sorry that we've not been on time. So as is our custom and practice, what I'm going to do is ask our board members to introduce themselves first. I'll ask that the guests and partners to introduce themselves once we come to the relevant item. So I'm going to go to my left, starting with Cassie, please.
I'm Cassie Sivapal and I'm the clerk to this committee.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Jordan Bowden, Roundhay.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Zara Hussain, Roundhay Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Jess Lennox, Crossgates and Winmore, and I'm substituting today.
Good morning, everyone. Nick Tones, school staff representative.
Good morning, I'm Tony Britton, representing Leeds Roman Catholic Diocese.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Karen Renshaw, representing Alsey and Robin Hood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Bromley, Horsforth and Rawdon.
Good morning, Andrew Graham, representing the Church of England Diocese of Leeds.
Good morning, Councillor John Tudor from Killenbeck and Seacroft Ward, substituting for Councillor Denise Reagan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Martin. I represent Roundhay Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Jules Hesselwood, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Kate Blacker, I'm a co-opted member on the board.
Good morning, I'm Jacqueline Ward and I'm the Parent Governor Representative for Secondary Schools.
Good morning, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Amanda Carter, Carfley and Farsley Ward.
Good morning, Angela Brogden, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Okay, so thank you and welcome everybody. So we'll get straight to the agenda. So item 1, Cassie, do you have any appeals, please?
No.
Okay, any items for exclusion?
No.
Okay, item 3, I have received a request to take a late item of business by email. We've had a discussion about that in the pre-meeting. My decision is that we won't take that item, although I'm aware all members have had copies of it. So it's there, but I'm going to stick with what we've set out in the agenda and the way that we're going to run the meeting this morning. So that's my decision on that. Item 4, do any members have any declarations of interest they want to declare at this point? No. Item 5, Cassie, do I have any apologies, please?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Bethel and Councillor Lennox is attending as a substitute. We've had apology from Councillor Reagan and Councillor Tudors attending as a substitute. We've had apologies from Councillor Richard and Councillor Acart is attending as a substitute. And we've also had apologies from Councillor Senior, Councillor Howley and Helen Bellamy.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. So move on to item 6, which is the minutes of the meeting from the 25th of January. Can I just ask if everyone's happy to take those as an accurate record? Yeah, Kate.
I may have misremembered this, but I might have been referenced in them as still being the primary parent governor representative. I can't remember now if that's in those minutes or some previous minutes, but if it could be checked and amended if it is those ones.
Okay,
thank you.
Yeah, if we can check and we'll make the adjustment if necessary. Then matters arising, we have minute number 57 on the initial budget proposals. Just to confirm that the board's deliberations did inform a composite report from Scrutiny, which was acknowledged by the Executive Board during its meeting on the 8th of February. And the report also formed part of the agenda papers for consideration at full council last week. Are there any other matters arising that anyone would like to bring up that we're not covering in the agenda? Okay, in which case we will move to our substantive item, which is item 7, the Leeds Safeguarding Children Partnership update, to which we have a number of guests attended. This is our main standalone item for the day. I'm just going to flag up at this point for my own personal needs. I will need to take a break at some point. I'm aiming for probably around 11:15 to 11:30 at a suitable point for about 10 minutes. Just so that people don't get upset if I stop us in, but I'll try and find an appropriate point to do that. As I said, this is our main substantive item for consideration today. Board members have felt it was important to dedicate a meeting of the Scrutiny Board around the issue of safeguarding children. The introductory report on page 15 of the agenda pack helps to provide some background context to the work that was undertaken by this board last year after learning that the Leeds Safeguarding Children's Partnership Executive had commissioned a review of the processes supporting the notification of serious child safeguarding incidents. The partnership executive gave a commitment to return to the board during this municipal year to report on progress following its review of the notification process and the collective decisions reached with regards to decision making in relation to serious child safeguarding incidents. However, today's meeting also provides an opportunity for the partnership to update the board on key cross-cutting themes identified through its review processes, as well as outlining key headlines from its latest annual report that's expected to be formally published this month. So if I can ask all of the guests this morning to introduce themselves in turn, I particularly like to welcome Farah Khan as the newly appointed Chief Officer for Family Help, who I'm sure will introduce herself as well, but you're very welcome and congratulations on your new post. And as you're first in line, you seem the right spot to start with introductions, and we'll go around that way.
Right. Good morning, Chair. My name is Farah Khan. I'm Chief Officer for Family Help in Children's Social Care Services.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ruth Terry. I'm the Chief Officer for Children's Social Work.
Oops. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jasvinda Sangera. I'm the Independent Chair for the Leeds Children's Safeguarding Partnership. And I'd like to wish all the men and women in the room happy International Women's Day.
Good morning, I'm Jill Marchant. I'm Head of Safeguarding and Designated Nurse for Safeguarding Children and Adults at NHS Leeds ICB. And I'm here to represent Jo Harding, who's our Executive Member for Health.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Chief Superintendent Steve Dodds. I am the Leeds District Commander for West Yorkshire Police and a member of the LSCP exec.
Morning, everybody. I'm Rebecca Roberts, the Legal Advisor to the LSCP.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Julie Longworth and I'm Interim Director of Children and Families.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Fiona Venner. I'm the Executive Board Member for Children and Adult Social Care and Health Partnerships.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor. I'm Deputy Leader of the Council and Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education.
Good morning, my name is Karen Shin. I'm one of the business managers for the Safeguarding Children's Partnership in Leeds.
Good morning, Phil Conran. I'm another one of the business managers for Leeds Safeguarding Children Partnership.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thank you to all of you for coming. Just if we note at the start that the partnership has provided us with 3 separate update reports within the agenda pack. And so my proposal this morning is we're going to deal with each one in turn. So we'll have one introduction on the reports rather than doing everything at once. Then we'll have questions and answers. Then we'll move on to the next theme and so on and so on. And I've also been asked to highlight that the LSCP report at Appendix 1 has the incorrect date and should read the 8th of March 2023. So if I can ask Councillor Venner, please, just if you have any introductory comments, and then I'm going to bring in Jasvinda to take us through the first part of the report and we'll go into questions then. So Councillor Venner, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is following the review of the notification process following discussion about this at Scrutiny last year in February and May. And this report reflects the work that's been undertaken by the 3 statutory safeguarding partners. So that's the local authority, health and the police. And this review was led by the police.
And the purpose of the review was to develop a more robust process around notification of serious incidents. And I think the report very much reflects how open and reflective the partnership has been, and the amount of input that we've had from the national panel and from the national facilitators. There's 3 national facilitators, one from the police, one from health, and one from social care. And the partnership have worked with them in this process. And I feel, I mean, Jasvinda will talk about this in more detail, but my view is that the partnership would all say that the partnership is stronger as a result of doing this review, and that it's been a positive piece of work. So with those very brief comments, Chair, I'll hand over to Jasvinda for the detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. If you look at Appendix 1 then on the paper here that you have in front of you, I'll talk through this report. So at page 19 in your papers. So the history of this report is that the notification systems and processes was a process that I raised concerns about in terms of not being assured about the processes. This was as a result of a case, which I won't discuss the case. However, it was a serious incident whereby 2 partners believed that it met the criteria for a serious incident and warranted notification, but one partner did not believe that was the case. And as a result of that, we had many conversations about that. As you know, the local authority have the duty to notify, not the other 2 partners, albeit we have to ensure that decision is informed by all partners. It was the view of the local authority that that particular case should not be notified. As a result of that, I was concerned because I did believe that it was a serious case. And as a result of that, that's what made me look closely at the notification systems and processes. So that's the background, actually, that I wanted to put here. And it was escalated, conversations were had, and thankfully, the result was that it did become a notification. We were able to learn lessons from that very serious case. So one of the things that we also did was we had a conversation around the notification systems and processes, because what was clear to me was that the review advisory group, which I chair, and that's where we have conversations about the most serious incidences. So if there's a child incident out there today where there's a serious case and a practitioner believes it warrants further discussion because it merits that level of seriousness, it will go to through a process. That is the process that we looked at. We would have a conversation at the review advisory group, and ultimately that discussion would inform whether or not it's notified. So given the fact that the feeling at that time was that the law states it is the duty of the local authority, the important point was that all partners felt that they could equally contribute to that decision making. Okay. So on page 21, you will see there are 3 options that we've been discussing in light of, well, actually, this system doesn't feel very fair, because if 2 partners, the whole point of child safeguarding and the partnership is that there's an equal responsibility on all partners across the city to safeguard children and young people. So you come to this particular part of decision making, and if the local authority decide it doesn't warrant a notification, well, then what happens to the 2 where they have different views? That's where we were. So we looked at those 3 options, and we had big conversations about that. And our health and policing partners wanted a system actually where it was fairer and more equitable. And the local authority with their legal advisors took the view that the law states we have to stick with option 1, which is on there. So what developed from that was a review into the systems and processes. And what I can say is I'm really pleased to see that the review has allowed us to look and speak with our partners about the system, whether it's fair, whether we are also escalating serious concerns into the rapid review process, etc. Because what we have to be assured about is that the most serious cases are being looked at and considered to learn lessons from them. That's what we need to be assured about. So Karen will go through a presentation, but what we do have now is we have a process whereby we have a very clear system where more people feel able to contribute to that. We have rapid review meetings where scoping authors are invited. So it's not just the 3 partners there. You know, if you have a report from, say, a health visitor, police officer, etc., they're able to come and present that report, which enables it to be more engaging, actually, because you can ask questions of that report, of the author of that report. Importantly, we have a system and a process whereby the rationale for decision making is documented and recorded in good time, and all partners since this review have felt able to make those contributions. So there has been a system change without a shadow of a doubt. I would say that, and I'm definitely assured about that. I think where we need to really think about the review is in terms of escalations. You know, being assured that our practitioners out there who are on the ground understand the processes and the systems and how to escalate a serious case. Because what we're identifying is that sometimes all the red flags are there, but there is still this sense of, well, should I escalate it or not? Does that make sense in terms of that? So there's still more work to do on that. In terms of the option 1, 2, and 3, as a city, what I did say was, and we've been invited by the national panel and by government to write to government. The executive board were invited, we all were. I did write to ministers at the Department for Education to talk about the experiences in Leeds, which actually are not isolated to Leeds. You know, this is happening across tables, across other local authorities as well. And in fact, only last week, I received a response from the Department of Education because at the present moment, they are rewriting Working Together. So I saw it as an opportunity. And so they'll be updating the guidance. Consultation will be in spring. But what they have told me is that on notifications, they are going to be providing a link and Working Together to the panel's practice guidance, which encourages the use of appointed independent scrutineers to help resolve differences when making the decision to notify. So they're planning to work alongside the panel to test with the sector definitions for serious incident notifications, and they're going to test further solutions to resolve disagreements when making notifications. So the point I'm making is the conversation here has impacted nationally, and that's, for me, is a positive thing. And it has been a journey for us, and I would say that we're still in that place. And where I would say there is a need for more progress, for me, it would really be to ask the question around assurance on the safeguarding child incidents has been escalated. Are we assured that our practitioners know how to do that and are confident to do that? And where the review wasn't able to look was those decisions where the local authority may decide not to notify, they need to be documented. We need to know those that haven't come to the table and why, I would say. And furthermore, in terms of learning, you know, all of you would have heard nationally and even locally that saying lessons learned, we've learned lessons from this review, etc. It's embedding that learning and disseminating that learning and doing that learning in a timely way. How are we assured that as a result of a tragic incident, be it a child death or a serious incident, something has changed in the system, and it's being able to monitor that, and that is a piece of work that does need to be done. So I think I'll end it there for now, but from my perspective, we have come a long way. I feel that it's more equitable. Notifications sit as they stand because that's the law, but Working Together is going to be considering this in terms of the moving forward. And this area needs to continue being monitored.
Okay, thank you, Jasvinder. That's very helpful and yeah, a really good update. So can I ask if any members have got questions or comments of Jasvinder at this point? So Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Jasvinda, we first met on the Domestic Violence Board, actually, and I was very impressed by your integrity and your will to do the right thing. Could I ask you a question about the notification system? You mentioned a serious case review, and how well do you think learning has been embedded since that case review? And can you assure us that the proper procedures are now in place?
So that particular case resulted in a child safeguarding practice review, of which the abridged version is on the website. It's a public document now, and it's important we share that learning. So what I understand now is there is an action plan being developed, but this is my point in terms of learning from reviews and being assured that that learning is being actioned, implemented, disseminated, and we can evidence a change in the system as a result of that. So where I stand, I suppose I would say there's ongoing work happening. Clearly, there were question marks around risk assessments and the risk assessments of all organisations and the consistency around that, and certainly around risk assessments of those sexual offenders that are placed with children and young people. That's on the public website. You know, this was a case where a young child was placed with a registered sex offender, and that raises a number of questions in terms of risk assessment and needing to do a piece of work around the monitoring of sex offenders and how can it be that a child can be placed with somebody who is on a register for sexual offences. So there is still a lot more work to do. I mean, and that's all I can really say to you there. I mean, my view is that there's a need to ensure that learning dissemination from serious instances is timely, is evidence-based, and I actually think it should be incorporated into the performance management framework, which should combine learning improvements from all reviews that we do, because there needs to be a very strong arm to ensure that when these tragic incidents are happening, A, we're listening to the voice of the child, but B, from that tragic experience, something is changing. And I'm saying, I feel there's still more work to do on that.
Thank you, Chair. You've raised something that concerns me a little bit, and you may not be able to answer this, Jasvinda. Perhaps another professional may be able to answer it. I wonder, do you think paedophiles can be reformed? I think that's an important question because clearly in the past children have been placed with paedophiles, and if that's the case that they can't be reformed, then we should look at, you know, they should never be placed with paedophiles.
I don't think I can answer the question, can they be reformed? That's a huge question. I think the question is how we risk assess those individuals whereby we place children. And you have to remember this placement was done with the authority of the court. That would have been informed by assessments. That's where the assurance comes from. So there is a need, and this has come out in the review, for the partners to consider this space and risk assessments. I mean, my personal view, no, you should not place children with registered sex offenders. That's my personal view. And I raised this case because it was a serious incident. And I think the bigger question is, if one doesn't think this is a serious incident, then what is? So I think it's a difficult, I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's where I stand on it.
Thank you. I think we'd be going down a whole different path with, but important nonetheless. Kate is next, please.
Can I just sort of bring the questions back to the notification process itself? Thank you very much for the reports. I found them really informative. And in addition to that, I took the opportunity to read chapter 4 of Working Together. And I'm very pleased to hear that that is going to be updated, because I think it's a document that's probably long overdue an update. In relation to the notification process, within Working Together, it obviously sets out very clearly the criteria for a notification, which is obviously set down in legislation, and obviously the duty upon the local authority. And it's encouraging to hear how the outcome of the review has been that there have been changes to the way in which decision making sits behind a notification and the involvement of all three partners. I was just curious because reading the relevant chapter, the criteria for a decision in respect of a local review is obviously different. So there's obviously the criteria for a notification in respect of a national review, and then the criteria in respect of a local review, if I've read correctly. So I just wondered about decision making in respect of area reviews, because there's obviously the potential for disagreement in respect of a decision on an area review as well. And also within the chapter 4, it does also state that sometimes it may be decided during the course of an area review that there should still be a notification made off the back of further information that might come to light. So I just wondered whether you'd identified whether there was any need for any strengthening of the processes that sit around the decision as to whether or not there would need to be an area review where you've determined that there might not need to be a notification, if that makes sense. Are there any other areas where you've identified that the processes might need to be improved?
I think colleagues may want to come in on this as well, but what you have to remember is that even if there is not a notification, learning will still take place.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are forms of learning, there will be decisions around that. And from each individual case, because when you come around a table, you're discussing, yes, best practice, but also what have we missed? And we also consider that in the context of other reviews. So if there are any consistent themes coming out of the reviews, then, and Karen is going to present those consistent themes to you, then we have to think about those themes in the context of, is it in an area? Is it of national concern? Is it? So we think in that space like that. I mean, interestingly, you know, since May 2021 to December 2022, we've done 11 rapid reviews, which is a huge increase in comparison to where we sat pre-May 2021. But we would notify a notification to National Panel. National Panel will give their view on the rapid review, and they may say it's of national concern and give us their advice. But in answer to your question, anyone can raise around that table that they believe that this is contained to a particular area and we need to have a review about this, etc. So that's like an open discussion. I'm quite assured about that.
Yeah. So if there was a disagreement though between agencies about the need for, because I think it says, yeah, so sorry, I'm asking, yeah, so obviously it's really encouraging to know that there's always lessons to be learned when you undertake a review, but in the same way that this particular case led to your concern that the process around notification wasn't robust enough and wasn't inclusive enough of the other agencies, the decision making as in regards to the need for an area review, is there any room for improvement in regards to that process as well? I mean, I would assume that if there were, it would have been highlighted, but I'm just curious, has this sort of review led to you thinking more about, is there anything we could do to improve that also?
I think when we consider that space of where there is disagreement, we have come a long way. And now there are every practitioner, if they believe something warrants discussion at the rapid review meeting, they will fill out the form, they will present their case, and we'll have that discussion. The point is, an independent chair will sit in that meeting and also ensure everybody's listened to fairly, etc. And then if there is disagreement at that point, and this, regardless if it's area, if it's national, whatever, a recommendation will go to the executive board, and the executive board will have that discussion. They have to ratify that decision. So you're going through that process of having an independent scrutineer at that table who facilitates that conversation. You know, I'm not a decision maker at that meeting. I ensure people are heard, etc. And if there is disagreement, it will go to the executive board, it will be ratified there, and I will present it there. So you would want them to make those decisions at that space and to hear what the disagreement is and to make decisions around that. And that's for me is a sound system.
Julie, you wanted to come in on?
Yes, please. Thank you. I suppose it was just to reinforce the fact that we have the LSCP exec, but underneath the LSCP exec, we do have the review advisory group, which Jasvinder is referring to, and which Jasvinder chairs. That review advisory group consists of senior colleagues from health, police, and children's social care. There has been a lot of progress, as Jasvinder has described, as a result of the review of the notification process. That rapid review, that review advisory group now will come together to look at notification. So once the decision has been made to notify, or even in discussing whether a case should be notified, that review advisory group are key now to those decisions. And there's robust, clear, challenging discussion that takes place there, as Jasvinder says, with an independent chair scrutineer present. I think the additional thing to say is that that group, we've now extended the remit of that group. So not only do they come together to discuss when a notification has been made, whether a notification should be made, but equally we have communicated right across the partnership where any colleague in any organisation is concerned about any child or any family and the way in which services have responded, that they can refer to the review advisory group for there to be an open discussion at that group about the concerns. And actually, we have seen that work in practice, and some of the learning that Karen is going to share later in this meeting, that learning comes not just from child safeguarding practice reviews, which have come as a consequence of notifications, but there's a range of invaluable, significant learning, which has come from those other discussions about best practice, about where we have worked well, but also where we could have done more, done better. The other thing I think just to say is that, I suppose I would go back to the strength of the partnership, actually. And again, just thinking about the ILAC inspection last year, and where the inspectors said that the strategic partnership is strong. They themselves said that although there have been some professional challenges, these are resolved through the strength of the partnership and the restorative culture. They also talked about the fact that we do have a strong continuous learning culture. And again, I think the work that we've done through the review of the notification process, the journey, and it's a continuous journey that we are on as a partnership in terms of best practice and that commitment to continuous improvement. That is a day-to-day journey that we are all on together. I just want to come back to the learning and the embedding of the learning, because again, the whole point of the National Child Safeguarding Review Panel, the whole point of child safeguarding practice reviews is about learning, is about ensuring that we are learning those lessons. The review advisory group that Jasvinder chairs tracks through a number of action plans which have come from reviews, formal reviews, more informal learning activities. So there is that scrutiny in terms of how that learning is being embedded. Within children and families, as an example, we have our advanced practitioners who take that learning. Our managers take that learning into the supervision of staff. We take that into our workforce development programme. We also have a specific capacity and change team, which, as an example, share a quality assurance and a learning bulletin every quarter, which again highlights the learning that has come from these reviews. We have specific action learning sets, breakfast forums. So there's a range of activity going on across the directorate and across the partnership. We also have the LSCP exec put on their own workforce development sessions for the partnership. Will never be done. This is a constant journey for us to identify the learning, identify the lessons, identify where we could be doing better. So, I just wanted to reassure, hopefully, that there is a lot of work going on, but it will never be done. This is something that we, have got to have a constant focus on.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. First, to Jasvinder, on the issue of risk assessments. So these, as I understand it, are the assessment tools used by multiple agencies to assess the risk of recidivism among, well, I suppose in all cases. You've raised a specific case around child sex offenders. So at present, your reviews outline that you've got multiple agencies using different tools. I think probation use Oasis, offender management use matrix systems, and those assessment tools deliver different responses. So you could have, as I think you've outlined, in one specific case, the same child sex offender being assessed and two separate tools delivering two different outcomes of risk, one saying, for example, medium, one saying high. So in your discussions with national government and locally, is anybody exploring the potential of having one risk assessment system that's accessed and understood by all agencies, so there isn't any confusion between the risk outcomes and any opportunity, therefore, for failings in cases to occur?
Karen is going to present because within the presentation, there is a section on page 29 that discusses the themes that have come out of our learning reviews. And one of the themes is in relation to different agencies' risk assessment processes. And clearly, it is identified that through reviews that practitioners are not always fully aware or fully understand the risk assessment processes used by different agencies, or what the identify risk levels assessment outcomes mean. That has been picked up. And this was particularly evident in relation to the assessment and management of registered sex offenders. So that's a piece of work that we have identified that we need to consider. I'm not aware, Councillor Stevenson, nationally, whether anybody is considering this. I have not raised that personally. But if we look at this in terms of case specific, you're right. Some people, in the particular case that we've learned from, what we have to remember is, for example, the Lucy Faithful Foundation, is an organisation that assessed the risk in this particular case. Unfortunately, that assessment was being used and it was outdated. It needed to be updated. That was the issue. So, there are many issues here in terms of risk assessment, but also practitioners relying upon risk assessments that are not up to date. And particularly in terms of registered sex offenders, one, we understand the monitoring of them, and we understand that you have to have up-to-date risk assessments for those sex offenders, especially if they're going to be placed with children.
On the back of that, can I ask further to Councillor Carter's question? Question to Councillor Venner, in terms of, and I'm asking this on the basis of Article 6 of the Constitution, Council Constitution. So on a policy point and practice of policy in the council, on the back of that answer on risk assessments, is it your view that convicted sex offenders, child sex offenders, can be rehabilitated?
That's not something I'm qualified to answer or would ever be asked to answer. I'm not a practitioner. I'm the political lead for children's safeguarding, but I don't sit on the RAG group. I don't sit on the safeguarding executive for children, and I'm never going to be in a position where I'm personally assessing risk around sex offenders. So I'm not in a position to answer a question about whether or not sex offenders can be rehabilitated.
But Chair, 6.3 of the Constitution says that the Scrutiny Board's role is to question members of the executive about their views on issues and proposals affecting the area. I can answer that question as an elected member. I don't believe a convicted paedophile can ever be rehabilitated. And I certainly don't believe that a child should ever be put in their care. So I'm asking your views as the person responsible for policy making in Leeds, and that feeds into these discussions, is what your personal view is on that matter, because that's important for us to understand where the policy is being shaped from.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat again. I'm not going to answer that question here and now. I'm not going to be bounced into giving you an answer, because I would want to, in a situation where a case was being considered. I mean, if Julie were to talk to me about a case, it would be to inform me. It wouldn't be to ask my professional view, because, as I said again, I'm the political lead for safeguarding children, but I'm not a practitioner. I don't have the operational detail. I don't sit on the RAG group or on the safeguarding executive. So I'm just going to repeat my previous response, Councillor Stevenson, which is that it's not my position to make those kind of comments, which are out of a very, I think whether sex offenders can be rehabilitated is a very specialised area of work around working with sex offenders that I don't personally work in. So I'm not going to answer that question other than how I have previously. Okay.
I think it's extraordinary you don't have an opinion on it, but that's fine. Let's move on. In terms of the notification system then, when we discussed this at previous boards, we had a lengthy discussion around serious harm and what the threshold was, and that was basically the basis of discussion of how we move that forward and whether a notification is made. So a year down the line, given the outcomes that have been the thematic outcomes that have come out of several reviews and what we've heard from the board today, could I ask Julie Longworth, in terms of the reason this came here, the initial discussion we had about the complaint that there was a disagreement in the case that Jasmine has just mentioned, do you believe that the systems and processes in place today, if we'd have been seeing that case blind, would mean that a notification would be made today and we would now all agree that serious harm threshold had been met as a result of the process you've just outlined?
I think the LSCP exec has made clear its position that it doesn't think it's appropriate to discuss individual cases in public scrutiny. But what I would say is that, and as Jasvinder has outlined at the beginning of this meeting, that I think that the work that has been done through the review of the notification process has been a really positive piece of work. I think it's significant that actually we have not had a situation either in the review advisory group or the LSCP exec where there has been a disagreement. And actually, I think, that reflects the strength of the partnership. And also, I think it reflects the discussions that we've had as an LSCP executive, as a review advisory group with the national safeguarding facilitators. I think they've been very clear that this is about judgment. Every decision that we make around a notification, around a CSPR, it relies on professional knowledge, experience and judgment that has to be applied on an individual basis. I am really reassured. I think LSCP exec colleagues may want to come in, but I'm really reassured that we are in a different place actually in terms of how we approach those discussions, and I think just the maturity as a partnership. I think we have had new colleagues join, and I think it takes time to develop those relationships and those trusting relationships. But I think what we've got is an open, transparent, strong partnership that is able to give sound challenge, within that the whole of the safeguarding arrangements in Leeds.
Thanks, Julie. And final question to Councillor Venner again. On the 16th of February, taking Julie's point, not case specific, but on the 16th of February, I asked you that if in any case where there's child protection involved and there's a case of serious child sexual exploitation, that whether you believe that a notification should be made. We understand from previous boards that you were involved in decision making then, but aren't now in terms of these reviews. So is it still your position that it is subjective as to whether all cases of child sexual exploitation should be referred to the National Board as a result of all the work that's gone on in the last year through the notification processes, or have you now changed your mind?
Again, as in my previous answer, I don't sit on either the RAG or the Leeds Safeguarding Executive. Therefore, I will not be involved in decisions about what cases are referred. I would defer to the judgment of the safeguarding partners from health, the police and the council, and the local authority has, as you know, the final decision on whether a case is notified. So it will be their decision and not mine whether cases of sexual exploitation or other incidents are reported to the national panel.
So are you saying on public record that you've never been involved in the process of deciding, you've never been in the room around the table as executive member in the discussion around whether a case should be notified?
As you are aware, I previously sat on the Leeds Safeguarding Executive Board, not as a statutory partner. It's not usual for my post to be on that board. I was on that board during a period of transition when we were implementing the changes from the Wood Review, and when the DCS and the Chief Superintendent and the Safeguarding Chair were changing. So I was on the board to provide some continuity and to help implement the new structures. When I was on the board, I was therefore involved in the Safeguarding Executive, which ratifies decisions made at the RAG or formally approves decisions made at the RAG as to whether cases are notified or not. So yes, I have had some previous involvement. I no longer do. When those structures were embedded, I came off the Safeguarding Executive. I no longer have any involvement in making decisions about whether cases are notified or not.
And my final follow-up, Chair, is just because from the answer that means some of the reports that we've been referred to in this, the thematic outcomes have come from, you would have been involved in the discussions around them at the time. So just want to final repeat of the question. On a general principle, as a person in charge of policy, it is still your view that not all cases of child sexual exploitation should be referred to the national panel.
It's my view that those decisions should be made by the Leeds Safeguarding Executive Partnership and not by me as somebody who does not sit on that board.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions myself, following on from Jasvinder's comment. So, firstly, to say there was some criticism of whether it was right to bring this at all to the Scrutiny Board last year, and I think everything that's happened since has utterly vindicated that it was right that we discussed it and brought it here. And I'm really pleased to hear of the positive changes and the national implications since then. The bit that I'm interested from Scrutiny's perspective is about what you said about practitioners having the knowledge to escalate. And it's really about how we get that rapid learning to be shared rapidly with practitioners on the ground, rather than it just being learning that's been done and high level discussions, but actually it's quickly disseminated. And what is the role then for this board in terms of moving forward, of us being assured that that is happening and it is happening quickly, and how do we, what measurements are in place for us to be able to see that's happening, because that's the key to it. It's one thing, what are the decisions made by the partners at the executive around the table, but the key is how do those things get there in the first place, and how quickly are practitioners feeling confident to say that that's the issue with a lot of these cases. For example, there were red flags, but they weren't picked up on, and that's how they became serious cases. They didn't necessarily need to be. So it's really what's our role and what are the next steps from this. So I know Julie's read, and perhaps some of the partners might want to come in on that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in first. I think the issue of escalation is a really important issue. As Jasvinder has said, it's an issue that we have focused on as the LSCP executive. We have had discussions with the broad Children and Young People's Partnership. So that's a broad partnership of organisations right across the city who seek to support children and families, to remind them that we do have a concerns resolution process in place across the city where any practitioner can escalate an issue if they feel that is necessary. I think some of the learning and I think some of the really significant learning for me, and it's come about through the discussions that have been had, again, within the review advisory group, within the exec, is I think there's almost a bit before that we do need to focus on. And I think, what we've seen is that at times in some of the incidents that we've been looking at, perhaps practitioners have felt a little bit uncomfortable. Perhaps they've had a gut instinct that something's just not quite right. But at times they've maybe not felt that that's been strong enough to actually escalate or to initiate that concerns resolution process. So one of the things that we are having to look, and we need to look around that, is, I suppose, how do we have explicit conversations with our workforce about that? Across the partnership, again, thinking about some of the workforce development opportunities that the LSCP business unit provide, thinking about our own supervision, again, that outcome focused reflective supervision, which is given by our managers, and again, speaking particularly in children and families, to explore and to reflect with practitioners, about actually what is their gut, what is their instinct, and the importance of acting on that. So I think there's something about developing confidence across the workforce and across the partnership, the voluntary sector, the community sector, universal services, about what do they do when they have that gut and that instinct, and where do they go with that, and I suppose to have the confidence that that is really, really important. So I think there's something about colleagues being clear, and I think sometimes it is clearer when there's something that you really disagree with, or something that you have an absolute clear-cut issue with in terms of initiating the conflict resolution. But I think there's as I've said, there's a point before that which we need to focus on, about actually how do we support practitioners to come together to talk about when they've got a bit of a concern, because that's the way in which we're going to be able to get a really timely response to these sorts of issues.
Jasvinder, did you want to come in?
I think you hit the nail on the head in relation to the next steps, actually. I mean, the key thing here is, are we assured that if there is a serious case out there today, our practitioners will know what to do in terms of escalation collectively? They may do things differently in each organisation, but are they fully appraised of the fact that it may have gone past concerns resolution? It may have escalated, and we've seen cases where that has happened. It may be that that question that Julie poses, what do they do if there is this feeling of, I'm not sure, or there's a lack of professional curiosity? Are we assured that they know what to do? I keep it back there. I'll put it right back there. And that's the next bit we need to do. Are we assured that they know what to do when it's serious as opposed to not serious? And that's where we have to be assured that they understand the escalation processes within their organisations as a partnership, the role of the review advisory group, etc., and to be able to have those conversations. Because in some of the cases that we've looked at, you can see the red flags were there, but people were not taking them up there. Well, why is that? And I think that's an important conversation that we need to be assured about, actually. So in the city today, if we know something is happening in our city and it's incredibly serious, is that practitioner going to know that I have got a process in order to take this further? And, it will be taken seriously. Because if we create a culture that enables those conversations, and I'm not saying there's a lack of that, by the way, in terms of there isn't that culture, it's about building on that in terms of that level of confidence. With respect to the learning, I absolutely agree with Julie. There are so many processes whereby we're getting the learning. I have no doubt about that. It's the dissemination of that learning, embedding that learning and evidencing that something in the system has changed as a result of that. So we are assured that something has changed, and that is unlikely, less likely to happen again. And I believe there needs to be an assessment of that. We need to be stronger at that. So, and we need to be timely with that as well. And maybe that's the role of scrutiny in relation to coming back and monitoring that action tracker, which I have looked at, and we do look at that at rapid review, and it may be capacity, it may be other things, but some of the learning is not timely enough and being picked up quick enough. And we need to have that assurance.
Thank you for that. I think perhaps if everybody could reflect on that for the end of the discussion about what next steps look like, but I think that's one of the key things that we need to dig down into. So, Chief Superintendent, you want to?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I've been listening intently throughout the time I've been in the meeting, and I will come to the point that was made specifically that both Julie and Jasvinder have spoken about in a second. But just a few observations from me. I think it's been a challenging time for the partnership in terms of moving through this, but I absolutely hold and echo the comments that Julie made a few minutes ago around the improvements both in terms of openness and transparency of that decision-making process, and the changes to that structure around the RAG meetings certainly give me confidence around the decision-making, the recording of the views of the three statutory partners around that table, and how that is then escalated to ensure that an open and transparent record of that decision making is made and taken forward. So I think that's the first point. I think Judy spoke a little bit about the strengthening partnership, and certainly we have taken a number of steps over the time that I've been part of the exec, and I've been in Leeds as the Leeds District Commander, around not only increasing the frequency of the discussions that the exec are having, but also as well bringing in national facilitators to look at the way in which we work and to start to build towards that. I think the point that was made around the difference between locally and nationally, the decision to refer, I think it is absolutely vital at a local level that everybody has a seat at that table, has the opportunity to raise an issue, because I think we would all agree it would be wholly wrong for us as a partnership if it was left to one agency to decide which issues were tabled. So I think it's absolutely right and proper, and I think we're in agreement certainly as an exec around that. So the differences in local versus national notifications, I think, are there. The national bit is very much guided by the legislation that is in place, and we must work to that legislation. That is unhelpful in some of the definitions it gives, particularly around serious harm, and so that will always be a subjective discussion, which is why it has got to be a case-by-case consideration, and that's a firm view that I hold. In terms of the learning, I think that is the most important thing that comes out of any of this, and it's clear that this process is about not apportioning blame, not finding fault, but more importantly around finding the learning points and acting upon those. And then the case in point, or the question in point that was made around the ability to raise issues. I'm just going to give a couple of really practical examples from a policing point of view, but it links into the partnership around how some of that is changing. So I think it's absolutely vital, the example of that 4 o'clock in the morning situation where a practitioner is there and knowing that they can raise their hand and say, I'm not happy with this, there's an issue here, I need to do it. We've moved to an electronic system where now officers, through the mobile devices that they carry operationally, can make a referral there and then, which goes in through the open door and then into child social care. So we recognise that need for practitioners to suppose have a voice, and that voice to be heard. And it's important that that's recorded, but recorded in an auditable way as well. So that's in place. absolutely at that practitioner level and a more specialist seat, we need to look at how we share that practice. So we're working at the moment to bring practitioners from across all three statutory members of the partnership together to start sharing that learning, discussing individual cases where it's appropriate to do so, looking at the learning points that have come back from the national reviews, but also as well to share information around how different groups work. And there's an example of that happening in May, where there'll be a practitioners event at Ellen Road Police Station where we will bring in representatives from the police public protection unit to work with practitioners from health and from the local authority, just to really show what the role of police protection is and how that links in, and to learn from each other. So I think in closing, I think it's been a useful discussion for me so far today. I would just echo that I think the partnership, because of the journey we've been on over the recent year or so, and working through this, are in a much stronger position going forward. And I'm certainly reassured by the structures that are in place now around decision making for national referral.
Thank you. So on this section, I've got Kate and then Councillor Carter, and then I'm going to take a short break before we move on to the next section. So Kate, please.
Sorry. Thank you. It's really helpful to hear the information about the sort of cross-partnership working that's been arranged at a more practitioner sort of level, because that was one of my questions really, in terms of how much individual professionals are sort of empowered to feel that they can escalate. Just thinking back to previous scrutiny board meetings that we've had in the past, and particularly, it's perhaps not as relevant now, but particularly during the pandemic when people were working more remotely or more individually, and the difficulty in terms of the opportunity to work closely and alongside colleagues and speak to colleagues about individual cases. I just wondered what work was being undertaken just to sort of strengthen that cross agency working, because quite often I think particularly maybe newly qualified or recently qualified staff may feel the pressure of doing that on their own, and what opportunity do they have to be able to discuss that with other professionals and other agencies that might be involved with the family. Has sort of supervision, guidance and supervision arrangements been strengthened? And also just sort of reflecting on, in terms of like learning lessons and embedding change and things as well, in the case that has led to sort of us discussing this at board, there was an issue around professionals not being comfortable about the decision of a court. So to what extent are we working with the courts now? I know there's a family court user group, but to what extent are we working with them to feedback so that professionals feel able and confident to perhaps raise concerns or challenge a case where they maybe don't agree with the decision of a court? And also just taking it back to, sort of to professional training, with regards to, I mean, some of the thematic sort of outcomes around like disguised compliance and professional curiosity. I mean, I think they've been there for a long time from my own professional experience. And I'd be really interested to know how much of this is fed into the university courses, you know, how much are, you know, trainee social workers being sort of taught about, you know, the importance of these themes at a very early stage in their career, so that that's already kind of ingrained in them when they actually start on their professional journey. So they're obviously sort of, that's obviously more of a national kind of policy consideration, but be helpful to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back in the first instance. I think just in relation to that multidisciplinary service delivery. So again, if I think about the early help hubs, which we now have in the city, and in those hubs, we have police colleagues, we have domestic violence coordinators, we have substance misuse coordinators, social care practitioners, family support workers, early help practitioners. And again, I think that's a really great example of where we've got that opportunity for sharing information, sharing intelligence, creating a space, again, at the earliest opportunity where people can have those discussions and also where people can take those concerns, should they have those concerns. Some of the other things that we do have in the city is we have what's called rethink formulation forums. So as part of our Leeds practice model, Rethink plays a key part of that, and it's a method by which professionals can come together and they work through a specific methodology. So they work through 6 Ps. So they have a conversation about, as an example, what are the protective factors in this case? What are the predisposing factors? It's a helpful structure to help them have a conversation about actually what do we think is going on for this child or for this family, to hypothesize what do we think are the real issues. And what that leads to is a really outcome focused plan. Now we have those rethink forums right across the city. So any partners across the city can take part in those. So it's another forum whereby people can come and ask to talk about a specific child or a specific family, raise concerns, have a conversation, even if they're feeling a little bit stuck, with a particular issue. One of the things that we want to progress through the learning that we've had recently is peer group supervision. So in Leeds, within the directorate, we have a number of restorative early support teams, and they have they've been researched. There's been some research into those, and they've really been effective in reducing the number of children needing to come into care. But a key part of the way in which they work is peer group supervision. So providing, again, that protective space for professionals to come together in a place that they feel is safe, where they can be very open and honest about their concerns, about that gut instinct, about perhaps their own lack of confidence, their own, whatever it is, that they can have those conversations. What we want to do, and we've had the conversation at the Review Advisory Group and at the LSCP exec, is how do we broaden that out? How do we create more of those opportunities in the city for practitioners at different levels to come together in the way that Steve's just described in some ways about the event taking place at Elland Road? I think just linking it with some of the national developments, so thinking about the recommendations from the Josh McAllister review and the recommendation about having multidisciplinary teams who will deliver family help, so early help, support to families, but also that child protection. Again, I think, we are having those conversations as a partnership about what will that look like? What does that multidisciplinary working look like? So there's an awful lot, there's an awful lot going on, an awful lot of positive work going on. But I come back to the point that will never be done. We're never going to sit on our laurels. This has got to be a constant journey of continuous improvement and workforce development. We've got to ensure that the workforce right across the partnership is given the right environment, the right support, whether that's, as I've said, supervision, workforce development opportunities, to be their best, so that we can help children and families to be their best too.
Yeah, go ahead, Ruth. Sorry, my list is currently getting longer rather than shorter.
Oh, sorry, Councillor. Thank you. It was just to respond to another couple of points, really, that you'd made. So one was really on the back of Steve's comment around that joint working with the police, and we've also got, I know the police are doing some training sessions this year, and social care colleagues are contributing to that. So we've got social workers, social work managers sort of coming to look at key themes. So again, I think that's going to be a really good opportunity to have those really key discussions. And your other question was around professional curiosity, disguised compliance. So in terms of social care, we've already commissioned some extra kind of masterclasses, which we do a lot of anyway, in terms of, up-to-date research, key themes, etc., for social workers. But within that, we have really close relationships with our universities, because that's your other point, which is a really good point about students and how they're picking up on those key themes. And we have a lot of our really experienced staff who go in and support lectures, and and work really closely with lecturers on some of those areas. So I think, like Julie says, there's always more to do, but I think we've got a really good basis for really feeding in that learning and working as a partnership at that level, at practitioner level.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the list is getting longer and longer, but I've got you to Councillor Carter, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the voice of the child. And it's to Jasvinder, please. I've long been concerned that children have consistently not been listened to. And in fact, I've raised this with you, Councillor Venner, in a meeting. Can you tell me, Jasvinder, do you have any evidence that children are now being listened more to since the review that you mentioned?
I think the first thing to say is that the lived experience of children and families play a crucial role in understanding our safeguarding system, and you know, we will discuss at every review advisory group when a case comes to us the voice of the child, and where is the voice of that child in that case that has been presented to us, and where there may have been missed opportunities or it has been heard. And without a doubt, we have got some improvements to make in that space. And that will be part of the improvement plan moving forward. We have the Children and Young People's Partnership meeting that myself and Councillor Venner co-chair, and we have a standing agenda item on there with regards to voice of children, and they present, and partners, we hold them to account in asking the question around how they ensure within their services, and this group is made up of very senior people, that they are also ensuring their services are listening to the voice of the child. So again, I would say, you know, this is an ongoing conversation. There needs to be a plan, and that absolutely needs to be part of it in terms of children and hearing their voice when doing assessments, and it being assured that their voices are being heard not in the presence of those that they may be at risk from or are at risk from. I don't know if that answers your question. Again, it's has to be part of that learning improvement and embedding that learning, and that needs to be part of monitoring the plan that we're going to be developing.
Yeah, Councillor Venner, you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond generally on this point, that while there's always room for improvement, the voice of the child is really, really central to the whole of the Children and Families Directorate. So we have lots of mechanisms through the Voice and Influence team whereby children and their families are listened to. That includes some of our most vulnerable children. So, for example, we have a very active Have a Voice Council for children who are looked after. We have a Care Leavers Council. I met with them last night because they were part of the Corporate Parenting Board. It was a really lovely part of the Ofsted report that we got a year ago, that the voice of children was seen by Ofsted as so central to our work. That shone out of the report, that we listen to children and they're central to what we do. That's not to say we can't improve. There's always room for improvement in this area, but it's a really central part of everything that we do across children and families, that children and families are at the heart of our work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious of time. I've got various people that have wanted to come in and respond. Can I just check? So we've still got 2 sections to go at. Are your points specific to this, or would you be happy to make them as we move along in the discussion? It's about the review. Okay. Same. Okay. So, well, in that case, it's Councillor Lennox first, then Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you. I won't be too long. I just wanted to thank everybody who's updated us about the review. There's some really key things that have come through, and it's been, as a member who's not on this board but sat on a couple of these meetings, the reassurance that we've had from Steve and Jasvinder and all of the partners involved about their confidence that this review has led to an improvement is really good. I think what's also come out is the fact that in shining light on all of the things that contribute to a decision about whether or not to notify nationally, the fact that learning is always taken away whether or not national notification happens is also reassuring. So that was really helpful to hear as well, and to be reminded of Ofsted's comments on the strength of the partnership. My question is off the back of Kate's question about the fact that practitioners and professionals here were left dealing with the decision of a court in one of the cases. Could the partnership or Julie and Councillor Venner expand on whether there's been national learning or national results from the review? I know it was mentioned briefly. It'd be interesting to hear what national outcomes may come from what we've learned in Leeds.
So I think essentially when we've had the individual reviews and individual sort of learning activity, I think the key issue is there's a lot of work done with children and families in the main before something gets near the court arena. So actually our real focus, and I think it's the right focus, has got to be on supporting partners, professionals right across the partnership to raise those concerns at the earliest opportunity. So in some ways, I suppose we've not focused as much on the court aspect, because the court is the court, and that's, it's got the legal jurisdiction and the legal power and authority. What we have really focused on, and I think it's been the correct focus, has been to enable and encourage our practitioners at every level to raise the concerns at the earliest opportunity. Because actually, I think Steve's mentioned it, I think Jasvinder's referenced it, I think Councillor Venner's referenced it. That's where we're going to avoid escalation, and that's where we're going to avoid, God willing, the need for notifications or, serious incidents or significant harm. It's about that partnership working. It's about people feeling empowered, confident to share those concerns, to share that gut instinct at the earliest opportunity. What I would say is, there is focus again within the National Josh McAllister review about the court and proceedings, and actually how that can be less adversarial, how that can be more open, really, in terms of the family courts being more open. In Leeds, we do have our family drug and alcohol court system, which is, it's an excellent system. And what that enables is for there to be a lot more open discussion in a less formal environment with the judge who's presiding. We are part of a small group of local authorities in Leeds who are looking at how we do, again, make our court system and those proceedings more transparent and more open. So I think there is opportunity for us, again, to feed in some of the learning from the reviews that we have had into some of the conversations that are going on nationally around the courts and how the courts are administered, but also at a local level through some of the regional pilot that we're involved with.
So it's Jasvinder and then Councillor Venner, and I'm going to have to, once we take those points, I'm going to have to stop for a browse so we can get to the end of this item, but I think we'll just have to run it across if that's all right. So Jasvinder, please.
Mine will be very quick. The court is ultimately informed by assessments. Let's be clear about that. A judge is sitting there and will be making a judgment based on what he or she is hearing. So Julie's right that we have to focus on that. But equally, what I will say is that CAFCAS were at the table. And is the court going to hear about this learning, is what I would say. Are those judges in Leeds who made that decision going to get to hear about this learning? Because my view would be they need to hear about this learning. That's the point I want to make.
I'll be really brief as well, Chair. As I think the board now, I sit on the Children and Young People's Board nationally, which is the Local Government Association Board, which is one of the many ways that we as a council are able to feed into what's happening nationally. And that board has considered, obviously, Josh McAllister's review, but also the National Panel report into Darren Arthur's deaths, and some of the learning from that report is very similar to some of the learning we've had. So disguised compliance and professional curiosity, for example, are themes which are being discussed nationally. So I just wanted to give the board that additional reassurance that there are, because of our place as an outstanding authority, and because we're a large children and families directorate, we do have a number of ways that we can influence the development of policy and practice nationally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to pause for a break. If we could be ready to go again at 5:02, and then I'll be starting off with Councillor Renshaw and Councillor Heselwood, and then we'll move on to bring in Karen and then Phil's sections, and we'll go from there. So thank you, everybody. Okay, if everyone could take their seats, please, so we can get ready to start again. Okay, right. Thank you, everybody. We'll get back. I'm sorry I didn't manage to. Bad chairing meant we didn't get to a neat stopping point. But we'll pick up where we left off. So the next contribution is from Councillor Renshaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to refer to page 31, where it explains about the 2 external reviews from Ofsted over the past 5 years, which have supported and endorsed the initial findings of the LSCP annual report, confirming innovative and outstanding practice and leadership. And that's referring to the City Council's Children's Services, as far as I'm aware. The year's annual report acknowledges the latest Ofsted report, and I'm sure we're the biggest core city outside of London that has had 2 consecutive outstanding Children's Services reports. However, I'd like to go on a bit further down, because it mentions the police effectiveness and efficiency, which has had a good report. And also it goes on to mention poverty, which remains the key area that can impact on outcomes of children and families. And I just wondered if Councillor Venner and Councillor Pryor could give us any information as to what effect poverty has had on the children and families in Leeds, and what increase in the risks that has brought with it that could refer to this report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can you do that in the context of the notification process?
Yeah,
please?
I'll do it really briefly, because I know the Thrive report was due to come to your meeting, wasn't it? And hasn't, because we're discussing safeguarding instead. So we'll come to a future meeting, I assume, Councillor Lamb. And at that meeting, I'll be able to talk in more detail about what we're doing to alleviate the impact of child poverty. But actually, there is a really, really well evidenced link between poverty and being taken into care, and between poverty and being in child in need of child protection plans. So part of the hugely increased demand on children's services across the country is directly linked to the rise in child poverty. So that's the relevance to the discussion around safeguarding that children are less safe as a direct result of poverty. And that's because most children come into care because of neglect rather than abuse. So most parents, want to care for their children. Fortunately, in terms of the cases we deal with, systematic deliberate harm of children is actually really rare. Most people who have their children removed from them are actually trying to look after them, and for lots of reasons are unable to. And poverty is a big factor in that. So we know that poverty causes an increase in domestic abuse, in mental health problems, in substance use, and that leads to children needing to be subject to statutory social work. So that's the explicit link between poverty and children being at risk, and we can discuss that more in future meetings. Thank you.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Pryor? Did you want to add anything?
I think Councillor Venner has covered that quite comprehensively.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Hazelwood?
I'd just like to say, Chair, that I'd like to thank the Executive Board member and their team, who are all up there, for the outstanding Ofsted report this year, which reflects the improvements which have been made or continued within children's services. So thank you to everyone down there that's been involved.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hazelwood, please.
Yeah, it's a question to Julie, if I can. And it's really good to hear about the learning that's taking place. And I just wrote down where you said the constant journey of continuous improvement that's happening within the service, which is really good to hear. And one thing that Jasvinda mentioned was that learning will be undertaken even if a case isn't notified. So basically to say that we will be learning and undertaking that learning from all cases for that continuous improvement journey that we're on. I wanted to ask, has that always happened? So basically, have we always used every opportunity to inform that learning and not just as part of this, our review?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been a critical part of the journey of improvement that children and families in particular have been on since 2009. That whole culture of, openness. And I suppose Steve touched on it earlier, creating the conditions where practitioners feel safe to be able to talk about their practice, to be able to talk about the decisions that they have made, what led them to make particular decisions at a particular time. And that's where that real, the key to that is that real high quality supervision that is provided to our practitioners right across the directorate. So we have a lot of workforce development in relation to supervision, and I suppose best practice around supervision and the method of supervision, if you like. I think the other area for me, maybe just to highlight, because I could go on, because there's a whole range of quality assurance work that goes on right across the directorate and also the partnership. And if I give an example, so the LSCP business unit will facilitate a number of multi-agency audits across any given year. They might be themed audits. So again, it might be that as some of the learning or some of the particular points that have come out of reviews, or actually, just queries, that actually we will focus that audit activity on particular areas. And again, like I say, that's a multi-agency audit. Again, we will undertake dip sampling within children's services. And again, as a partnership, we have a group which is called the JTI group. So it's the Joint Targeted Area Inspection, and they meet together regularly. And again, they will audit, they will review, they will look at individual pieces of work to get the learning from that. And I suppose it goes back to the point that Jasvinda perhaps made earlier about actually, how do we know that things are improving? And again, audit within the Children and Families Directorate, but also audit as a multi-agency partnership is absolutely critical to that. Again, when we have a weekly review, as an example. So Farah Khan, who's here today, chairs a weekly review. So that takes place every Monday afternoon. It includes police, it includes health, it includes children and families. And that meeting, as an example, looks at all of the referrals and the work that's gone through our front door, so duty and advice in the previous week. And that multi-agency group applies scrutiny in terms of the decision making that's been made. So whether it's strategy discussions, whether it's the decision that's been made to either refer something into statutory social work or something into early help, that scrutiny takes place every Monday. If it's felt through that discussion, or indeed through any of the audit work, that actually things could have been different, should have been different, could have been better, there's individual conversations that take place with the practitioners involved immediately. And again, this is something about ensuring that we get that the timely learning in the timely ways possible. No matter what review we do, whether it's a child safeguarding practice review or whether it's some sort of different type of learning activity, where we have those conversations in the review advisory group, again, we will take those conversations straight directly to the practitioners who are involved. So we'll have conversations with their managers, we'll have conversations with them, we'll ask for it to be a feature of their supervision. And again, we'll have discussions about actually, do we need to do some breakfast meetings around this? So again, and I suppose maybe just going back to the Ofsted inspection last year and the comments made there by the inspectors, who did say that we did have a strong continual learning culture. And I think that's based on the evidence that they've seen of some of the things that I'm just describing today. But again, I've got to say, it's a continuous journey. We're not about to sit on our laurels. It's something that we have really, really focused on in terms of our improvement journey. And it will remain an absolute key focus for the directorate, but also for the partnership.
Thank you. Right, last point, Councillor Stevenson, and then I'm going to bring Karen in to introduce the next part of the report, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to go back to a comment that Jasvinda made at the very beginning regarding a national review. I think, Jasvinda, you mentioned that you had submitted a response to a national review on working together and national practices. Can you confirm that's my understanding is correct there? And then secondly, to Julie, has the local authority submitted a formal response to that review, and are we part of it?
Okay, so the first thing to note is the conversation around notifications, the systems, the processes. We've been having national conversations with the national panel, Annie Hudson, and it was Annie Hudson who informed us that working together has been rewritten. So we were aware of that, but invited us, the national facilitators invited us all, executive board, myself included, to write to the national government, ministers, etc., Department for Education and Annie Hudson to talk about our journey, the improvement journey. So the consultation is happening in spring. However, we're invited to write to them before the consultation, which is what I did. And that's the response I've given you today in terms of the changes. That's my perspective. I'm not sure where the executive are at in terms of writing to people nationally, but we're all invited.
I'm happy to come in. The LSCP exec, the three key statutory partners haven't given our views or contributed to the consultation as yet. I think the reason for that, and I'm sure Steve will be, feel free to come in, is I think that we wanted to have those conversations with the national safeguarding facilitators, because actually I think the conversations with the three facilitators have been really helpful, again, in helping us to continue the discussion and our thinking around this. So I'm confident that we will. I think obviously we will want to contribute as the three key statutory partners to that consultation process.
And can I just add that Jo Harding, who's the executive member on the LSCP, is representing health nationally at the Safeguarding Partner Engagement Group, which will be looking at the rewrite of working together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to the next section. So, Karen, if you would like to introduce the next bit of the report, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to be talking to the report at Appendix 2 of your papers, which gives an overview of the cross-cutting themes that we have identified in our review processes over the last 18 months. As we've heard today, and as people are aware, we as a partnership have a statutory responsibility to review serious safeguarding incidents. And we do that through the rapid review process, and where appropriate, we commission child safeguarding practice reviews. But again, as we've also discussed today, that learning and consideration of learning is continual and continues to take place in cases which are not notified in relation to being a serious child safeguarding incident. So the learning that we're presenting today is very broad and across all of those review processes, as well as the auditing that has been referenced as well today. I think one of the key things to say is that we always start from a strength-based process. So very much when we're looking at learning, we want to look at what has worked well, where we can build on good practice, where we can replicate that and learn from that, as well as the areas that maybe need to improve. Maybe look at systems and processes that need to improve. So our learning is based on those areas as well, and we look at that always in that process. We've heard today about the dissemination of learning, and I just want to sort of pick up the fact that we disseminate that as a partnership across the partnership and the wider workforce in a variety of ways. And we produce learning briefs. We include learning within our own multi-agency training and provide resources to support our partner agencies in doing likewise within their own internal training. There are presentations at multi-agency forums, such as our biannual network meeting, which is a meeting for practitioners and safeguarding leads across the city to attend. But I think we would absolutely acknowledge and recognise the conversation we've had today about how do we monitor that dissemination within our partner agencies. We've heard some really good examples from colleagues today about how they disseminate that internally, but we've got quite a large partnership across the city. So as a partnership, how do we ensure that that dissemination is taking place right across our partner agencies and down across all of our workforce in relation to that? And as has been acknowledged, that is a piece of work that we're looking at both within the review advisory group and the partnership and the business unit as a whole. The report itself provides an overview of the cross-cutting themes that have come from our review activities, as I say. I'm not going to go into those in detail, partly for time, but partly because you've had the report in advance. But what I would like to pick out is that you will see that within all of those cross-cutting themes, what our reviews have showed us is that we have seen some excellent practice and some really good practice in those areas, as well as areas that we can improve upon. And also the areas there identify some of the work that we are doing in relation to some of those theories. We talked about how we are responding quickly. An example of a quick response there is in relation to the learning in relation to cases where there are complex health needs for children. And one example of a quick response in relation to that is that we have looked at our policy for children with complex health needs who travel abroad and ensure that they have the right support and health services available to them when that travel. One of our reviews identified that actually that is a continuing need when children are moving across areas within the UK, not just abroad. So we have reviewed and adapted that policy in response to that. We've heard from Steve about the work that they're doing multi-agency around risk assessments. And again, we are developing a briefing and a web page that will look at all the different assessment processes that agencies do and that will encourage practitioners to seek out those conversations and that understanding with the relevant agencies to understand their assessments and what assessment results mean in the context of that particular situation or family. So Councillor Lamb, I'll leave it there if people have got questions about specific themes, but that was just an overview for you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So any questions on Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you. In the context of those cross-cutting themes, I wonder, so to just confirm for me that who I presume you drafted this report, whoever drafted this report has gone through the 3.1, the previous reviews, and manually picked out what you've interpreted as those common themes. Is that correct?
Yes, so we've looked at all the reviews and the review work that we've done across that period of time, and we've looked at those themes that are reoccurring and that are cross-cutting across our processes.
So, although Councillor Venner referred to the specific case of Star Hobson, I'll take your earlier instruction, Chair, not to mention specific cases. But if you look through all those cases are publicly available. Anybody can go on the Leeds Safeguarding Children Partnership website and look at those review cases anyway. So in that context, and I've done that, so in that context, one of the thematic outcomes that's not in this report that stood out to me was the Section 7 reports, which Jasvinder referred to earlier on, quite rightly, in that all of the previous conversation we've had about risk assessments all feed into that Section 7 report, which is where the local authority go to court and say to court, here is our evidence, whether we think a child, or for example, if it's a custody court, whether we think this person is a suitable person to have custody of a vulnerable child, and the court makes its decision based on that Section 7 report. Indeed, in one of the cases, it specifically says that the Section 7 report is one of the sources guiding the court's deliberations. So it's evidently clear that although we're right to say that the court's ruled, and we can't do anything about that, that's a fact. But the court's made its decision based on information we as a local authority have provided to it in conjunction with partners. And additional to that, one of the themes that's being picked up is that even after that court's decision, no professional actually lodged any concern about outcomes. So there's two themes that seem to be missing in the report, which is any mention of involvement around Section 7 reports, and then also the ability of professionals to raise concerns afterwards or during about the decisions that have been made on the basis of those Section 7 reports. So my first question to Jasvinder would be on, throughout all the multiple cases that you and your executive deal with, how often does the issue of Section 7 reports come up as a failure? And then I suppose, Julie, as a directorate point of view, as a result of this overall review, what changes are being made into the way that Section 7 reports are dealt with within the directorate?
Rebecca just wanted to come in.
Apologies, Jasvinder. I just thought it might be helpful for the board to have a little bit of insight into what a Section 7 report is, so that they understand, I suppose, the context of that question. A Section 7 direction is Section 7 of the Children Act 1989. It's where an application has been made under Section 8 of the Children Act for, and usually those sorts of applications are made between private individuals, so maybe a mother and a father, or a grandparent and a parent, for what's called a private, colloquially a private law order, often a child arrangements order. And a child arrangements order might make arrangements for where a child lives or who they spend time with. So I think when Councillor Stevenson's talking about Section 7 reports, it's where a court makes that direction in a private law case for there to be a report to be undertaken, which is in effect the court report, to assist the court when it comes to its decision making. And more often than not, that report is undertaken by CAFCAS, and that's their role, to be the court reporter. But sometimes where perhaps there's been very recent, that's with perhaps within only months or weeks of involvement of a local authority, then the court has the discretion to be able to direct that the local authority undertakes that Section 7 report. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jasvinder and then Julie, please.
Thanks, Rebecca. That's helpful. I think Karen might be able to help me in terms of the number of Section 7 reports that have come to the review advisory group, because when we call a review advisory group to do a rapid review, we call upon the agencies that were involved in that child's life to provide all information of their involvement. That's what we would do. And that would include the reports as well. I can't remember the Section 7 report coming. We've only ever had, I don't know how many we've had come. One, just the one. Okay, just the one. And yeah, we would have to look at that and scrutinize it and ask questions of it, which is what we do in all the cases in terms of what's presented to us. And we'll have a conversation about that. In cases where, I don't want to get case specific, but where we have real concerns, where court decisions have been made, we will look at the risk assessment behind that, and that's that report. I feel like I'm waffling, Councillor Stevenson, but from my time of being in this role, I've only ever come across one Section 7 report at the review advisory group, and that was scrutinised. And as you know, we've gone on the journey to make sure that case was dealt with as a serious incident.
Yeah, I think the report that's been presented today and that Karen's just gone through highlights the thematic learning. So I suppose patterns of learning that have come from a number of reviews, be that child safeguarding practice reviews other learning or quality assurance activity. So there's not been a thematic learning in relation to Section 7 reports. What there has been is that thematic learning in relation to assessments and how I suppose multi-agencies work together in terms of whether it's individual agency assessments, whether it's multi-agency assessments, what, as it's set out in the report, what people's understanding of that is, actually what those individual assessments are assessing, because sometimes it's, it can be assessing different things. So that's why the thematic learning is in relation to assessments rather than Section 7 reports, because we've not seen a pattern in relation to the learning activity that we've had across the city. What I would say is just in terms of the learning that we have had in relation to Section 7 reports, one of the changes that we have made within the Children and Families Directorate is that we have now ensured that any Section 7 report is now actually signed off, approved by a service delivery manager. So previously that responsibility would have sat with a team manager who is responsible for a team of social workers. We've now escalated that really to bring in that additional oversight, that additional formal scrutiny in terms of sign off by a service delivery manager.
Okay, thank you. Kate, please.
I think Julie's actually answered already what I was going to ask about Section 7 reports. Julie, would that also apply for Section 37 as well? I don't know if Rebecca wants to tell the board what that is before you answer.
Thank you very much. Yes, a Section 37 report is also a direction made under that section of the Children Act 1989, where there are private law proceedings, as I say, usually between private individuals. Therefore, there's no state intervention at that stage, but where the court has identified that there is a likelihood of significant harm for the subject children, and they direct a Section 37 report be prepared by a local authority to look into the circumstances of the children and to make a recommendation to the court as to whether or not public law proceedings ought to be initiated. And I don't know if I can assist further, Julie, but in Leeds, any report that's prepared in conjunction with Section 37 is actually signed off by a head of service.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So any more questions or comments about Councillor Carter?
I've got a question around disguised compliance. Because if you asked any ordinary person in the street, if you thought a paedophile or a criminal might not be telling the truth, they would give you a very straight answer. So it concerns me that this even has to be put into the report. So can you reassure me now that people who have been who are sex offenders or paedophiles are being viewed with some sort of suspicion now?
I think I would just I suppose come back to the learning that is in the report, and the fact that it is in the report, I think highlights the significance and the importance of this issue, and the priority for us as a partnership. Again, this has got to be an ongoing focus as part of our basic workforce development. Again, that focus in supervision, that focus in training. As we speak this week, actually, there's as I understand it, there's a number of masterclasses going on right across the region in relation to disguised compliance. I think it's fair to say, and it's true to say that individuals across the partnership will be at different stages in their own professional development. I think that goes back to some of the comments that were made earlier around training, around the fact that we now input into those university courses where we can highlight some of the issues, some of the learning that we have had. But it's a mainstay of our offer to the workforce in terms of workforce development and ongoing supervision, and we will take the opportunity as a partnership, to revisit this in a number of different forums, but we'll never be done. We will always have people joining the workforce. As I say, we will always have people at different stages in their professional development. So it's got to be an ongoing focus.
Jasmine, did you want to come in? Then I'll bring you back.
For some practitioners, disguised compliance is quite a new word, actually. And it's the awareness of that as well. It is, you know, it's the understanding behind it. You know, what is it and what does it mean? You know, do we need to have a definition of that to be able to disseminate that? And also, there is a link here, in my view, of the voice of the child, because ultimately, who is disguising compliance is very often the caregiver or the parent or a perpetrator. And, you know, it's looking behind that, isn't it, in terms of what is being said and asked. So there's a link here in terms of the voice of the child to be able to get to what is really going on for that child in their experience, etc.
Chief Superintendent Dodds, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just really to add from a policing perspective. I think the challenge for us around disguised compliance is we have a workforce that works across a number of incidents and areas of business across this. So from its most simplest form, it's around ensuring that our training, and it absolutely is around the new university entrance routes for police officers, but also our general training is around understanding the different facets that come to the multifaceted incidents that police officers attend, and just really equipping our officers with some of the what seem like quite simplistic approaches at times, but things like splitting parties involved in incidents to get differing accounts and to understand what's going on. So there's lots of things that go on from a practical point of view there, but then that is reinforced by the work that specialists within policing do. Public protection is a prime example of that, where our public protection officers in their interaction with registered sexual offenders are looking at how the interactions work, what the responses are, and even the use of polygraph testing around some of those responses as well, to try and understand what's coming back from those individuals. So absolutely, it's holds a place within this report and this review. But if I can just offer some reassurance that it cuts across a number of roles within policing and is as an important part of the training that we deliver.
Thank you. You want to come back, Councillor Carter?
Thank you. Yes, I'm heartened to hear that, Chief Superintendent Dodds. However, disguised compliance is, in my view, an overuse of ridiculous jargon. There's no wonder professionals sometimes get it wrong. Why not use it in much more simplistic words?
Anyone want to respond to that?
I do think it links. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, I think certainly from the work that we do, I think it's understanding it at that strategic level around what the terminology means. I think at a more practical level, it is about having common sense conversations with operational police officers, in my sense, and police staff members around what that means and how to deal with that. And it absolutely doesn't escape people in my line of work that there is always a number of different angles and elements to an account, and we need to try and get to the root of that and understand what the truth of that situation is. So I think it is about keeping it as simple as possible.
Thank you. So Jasmine was going to come in, and then Farah, and then Kate's got.
The same point, just to echo what the superintendent is saying here, because it is about awareness.
I just want to, having responsibility for workforce development in children's services, but also being part of the forums where we audit and QA live work, the referral review meeting that Julie discussed. Actually, I think the point about language is really important, and what I want to reassure the board is the work both locally, regionally, the partnership work and nationally is focused on actually what these phrases mean, because they can easily be branded about without meaning anything to a practitioner going into the house. So, for example, this week, the regional focus of the masterclasses has been around professional curiosity and almost the jigsaw puzzle of a child's life. So one professional might go in and just see a little glimpse, but how do we fill those other pieces and the voice of the child? So the focus has been around understanding behind those, because often we get into jargon that's not helpful, especially across different roles. And we had a masterclass yesterday on professional curiosity that I delivered, and over 200 practitioners across the partnership, across the region, attended and took away lots of learning from that and shared lots of learning. So it's really important that we do move away just from language. I suppose they help us understand the themes and how we pull them together, but it's about equipping practitioners who knock on doors, whatever their role, to understand the importance of building that picture of a child's life. So that's the focus of the training.
Okay, thank you. Kate, please.
Yeah, I mean, just on disguise compliance, it may seem sort of obvious to board members, but actually I think, you know, when individual professionals are on the ground, you know, cases are increasingly complex, and in order to sort of fully appreciate disguise compliance, often it's necessary to look right across a case and look at history and identify themes. And that it, you know, yeah, the jargon is sometimes not helpful, but equally the very phrase disguise compliance, I think, underlines the complexity of disguise compliance itself. But actually the point I wanted to ask about was more in relation to the thematic outcome relating to risk assessments. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of risk assessments, often in complex cases involving sexual offending, it's necessary to look to specialist independent assessments. And I think I read that one of the outcomes had been that, you know, those assessments are very much a point in time, a given point in time relating to particular circumstances, and the need to understand and appreciate that that can be dynamic and changing. So I just wondered what the department was doing in terms of embedding that knowledge and understanding within the workforce, and ensuring that in future its own assessments reflected upon whether there was a need to update a independent assessment that might have been undertaken historically. What sort of quality assurance is being put in place in relation to that?
I'm happy to come back on that. So I suppose, as with all aspects of the learning that's been set out in the paper before scrutiny today, there's a range of, you know, actions within the Children and Families Directorate about how that can be disseminated, embedded, but part of that is discussion. You know, it is about having those discussions. So again, whether that's in supervision, which is key to this, whether it's in peer group supervision, whether it's back to those rethink formulations, whether it's back to groups of staff that are advanced practitioners pulled together using a case study, you know, to perhaps sort of explore issues, explore the use of assessments. The point that you make, just in terms of assessments being dynamic and actually only being used for the specific context in which they have been developed, is key. So that message is, you know, absolutely has been cascaded, embedded, reinforced, not just within the Children and Families Directorate, but across the partnership. You know, the conversations at the Review Advisory Group, the conversations with the LSCP executive have supported that. But again, it's they have to be constant conversations, you know. So again, all of this learning directs, as I've already said, you know, the focus of supervision, the focus of those rethink formulations. You know, it's about, as we are going about our day-to-day work, no matter who we are, whether it's myself as interim director, whether it's a chief officer, whether it's a newly qualified social worker, that actually these points of learning are in our mind.
the shaping, the influencing, the very conversations, the lens through which we are looking today at a particular child or a particular family. But that's got to be constantly reinforced, you know, again, through formal workforce development offers, through our master classes. It's just, you know, it's an ongoing constant focus.
Just to add to that, Chair and Kate, so we've done, and Farah might want to come in afterwards, so we have done an extensive review of our workforce offer, and we review that on an annual basis anyway, but in particular around assessment. So we've done a particular programme of assessment and decision making training and development for our team managers. So again, it picks up on all these key areas that we've been discussing today, but particularly around assessing sexual abuse, the impact of sexual abuse, assessing sex offenders. We've done a particular piece of work with an external agency, particularly for our advanced practitioners, who then work really closely with our social workers. So again, thinking about the importance of updating assessments, reviewing assessments, having them contemporary, understanding that dynamic nature of assessments. I would also say linked to that is we've got a piece of work that started very recently with probation, again around getting practitioners together to start to understand that difference of the different assessments and actually what they're assessing, and being able to have those really confident conversations about what they're actually assessing and then what the outcome is and how that impacts on children and their safety. So they're just kind of programmes of work that are ongoing. Some have concluded and some will continue.
Thank you. I think Jasvinda wanted to come in, and then back to you.
I actually have a question. I was just thinking, and I know that the work with the police in terms of the practitioner event that's going to happen will explore these sort of themes as well, which is helpful. But in terms of policy and a change in policy, is it now policy that where we consider children who are living in households or placed with registered sex offenders, that all their assessments are up to date? Is that now the case? Because what we know is that in relation to the case where we're learning lessons from, one of the issues was practitioners were relying upon an assessment that was out of date. So what I'm asking is there now a policy decision or in the structure, the system, whereby you're relying upon these assessments where children are placed or where there are registered sex offenders? We're ensuring there is some quality assurance system that they are up to date, I suppose, is my question. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I suppose really that is, you know, that's the day-to-day nature of our work. In terms of whatever assessment you know we're currently working to has got to be in the here and the now. It's, as we've just said, they are dynamic, you know, so where we are involved with a child or a family, where they are receiving support from the directorate, you know, that focus on the assessment, on the needs, the changing needs, the emerging needs, the changing context of the family is obviously, you know, under review and under scrutiny. One of the things that I did just want to come in and say, which I meant to say earlier, was that we have a set of practice standards which our social work colleagues work to. And one of the things that we do and we have done recently is that we revise those practice standards in following on the learning that we have made, and where we feel that there need to be adjustments, you know, again, to highlight some of the particular themes that are coming out of these reviews. We will revise those standards to reflect that. So again, you know, that's really underpinning the day-to-day work of our social work workforce.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to bring, I'm conscious of the time, I'm going to bring Phil in now to give us an introduction into the LSCP report, and then we can start to look at the next steps once we've dealt with questions and comments on that. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I just think it's worth, I think it's important just to give you some context on the role of the LSCP business unit within the partnership arrangements. Karen and I, we both manage the LSCP business unit, and we are commissioned by the 3 statutory partners to support the LSCP multi-agency safeguarding arrangements within Leeds. And I think what's important within these arrangements is the business unit's independence. Our work is directed by the partnership's needs. We also work with the independent chair to inform the LSCP executive and the wider partnership on our position in terms of the effectiveness of the safeguarding system through our quality assurance role. And this means looking at what's working really well, but also looking at different parts of the system that may need strengthening as well. So a lot of our work sort of is around supporting subgroups that sit within our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. We provide advice on statutory elements of working together to safeguard children 2018, such as undertaking child death reviews and child safeguarding practice reviews and quality assurance audits. So we are quite independent, but we're there to support the partnership in their arrangements and thinking about what needs to grow and develop in terms of strengthening those arrangements. So I'm quickly going to move on to the some of the sort of the key highlights from the annual report. And I think some of the key highlights is not just about the safeguarding system, it's about everybody that works with children, young people and families in Leeds. We are responsible for bringing a lot of our findings together and some of the things that cause children and young people to be sort of safe or, you know, have their needs unmet sometimes. And one of those key issues, which was mentioned earlier, is around poverty. Poverty still remains a key issue that can impact on children and families. And it should be no surprise to anybody that as family resources reduce, the cost of living crisis, it has a big impact on families in Leeds. We know, as I said earlier, parents want to be good parents, but with the financial challenges they face, can have a significant impact on parenting, on their own mental health, the cost of food and rent, family relationships can break down very quickly. It's a whole dimension of additional stress that families are experiencing, especially post-COVID and with the cost of living crisis. So for us, it's really, really important that the child poverty strategy mitigates some of these risks in Leeds, and that it's got a full backing from all concerned, and that we ensure that there's a way of measuring the impact of that strategy as well. The second point I'd like to bring to the board is about the importance of recognising children and families' needs earlier and as early as possible, as we know that family circumstances can escalate quickly without support. It's important that families' needs are identified early and that families are aware of the support that can be offered. It requires, again, everybody that works with children and families to identify when a child or family is in need. And again, that's broader partnership work, and that's everybody that works with children, young people and families. The refresh of the early help strategy is welcome. It will require, again, the commitment of the partnership to make sure that it is implemented effectively. And again, the partnership will play a key role in challenging that strategy and providing evidence that the strategy is working for children and families. On our previous annual report, we did highlight the need for the city to focus on responding to trauma that some children and people experience in their lives. This may be through experiencing trauma through domestic abuse, through child protection concerns, things like the death of a family member, all of which, if it's not dealt with, we know that trauma can manifest itself later on in life. And the trauma-informed strategy is a significant direction in ensuring that Leeds is a trauma-informed city. It can identify and respond to childhood trauma and look towards breaking those intergenerational cycles of abuse that, you know, we see all over the country. I'd just like to point out that as a business unit, and what we do share with partners, is that we have got significant evidence that the safeguarding arrangements in city appear to be very strong. This was confirmed in the Ofsted report, which was mentioned earlier. And again, we get some confirmation of that through other inspections, other inspectorates that come into the city and challenge some of our partners. And again, I think it was mentioned the Peel report undertaken on the police as well, where the response to vulnerable people was good. So in terms of my view and the view of the business unit, and as we are independent, in my experience, Leeds is very much a place where senior managers welcome challenge on any part of the safeguarding system and also encourage practitioners to have a voice to help shape and improve services. The executive also funds the independent chair, which provides that other layer of scrutiny on the safeguarding arrangements. Again, this demonstrates that they are open to challenge and scrutiny. Moving forward, there are some things coming down the tracks that the LSCP partnership need to consider. The arrangements that we've got now have been in place for 3 years, and I'm aware that the executive are looking at to reset some of the parts of the safeguarding system, think about what's working, things where that might need more strength put in place, and to identify opportunities to again strengthen the safeguarding system, which will reflect that we do have an impending new version of working together coming down the track. So we've got to make sure that everybody's ready for that and everybody's ready to support that. And of course, what's been mentioned earlier is the independent review of social care by Josh McAllister, which was undertaken last year. And I believe in February 2023, the government has already responded to that review. So any recommendations from this review will require the commitment and support of all our partner agencies that make up the safeguarding system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Phil. I've got Councillor Martin first, please.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that presentation. And it was reassuring again to find your independent conclusions that senior managers welcome challenge, that we fund an independent safeguarding chair in Leeds, which isn't a statutory requirement. I just wanted to focus on poverty and child poverty. And in your report, you say that poverty is a key area that impacts on children's outcomes, and that echoes what Councillor Venner said when she outlined some of the specific effects of poverty on children. Now, immediately after the safeguarding, after the Ofsted report was presented to this board, the Director of Children's Services highlighted poverty as being the single most damaging factor for children and young people in this city. So I'm really not looking forward to, but I'm just awaiting this scrutiny board's opportunity to look at that strategy on child poverty, which was delayed from this meeting and will be coming to the next meeting. But I just want to look at some of the stats. So on page 32 in paragraph 3, you say the latest estimate from HM Revenue and Customs is that there's 36,496 children living in poverty. Is that within Leeds? Yes, yeah. Okay, good, because you know that's a big jump on the number that I was aware of previously. Now I'm aware of the national statistics for children not just living in poverty but living in destitution, and I just wonder whether the thing that's coming to the next meeting can look at the numbers, if we possibly can, of children living in destitution in this city. So that's children living without enough food or enough money to stay warm and keep clean, let alone poverty, which is awful. Thank you.
Did anyone want to come back on that? We are going to cover it at the next board meeting. So okay, well, I've got Councillor Stevenson next, please, and then Jackie.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just, I know this is a summary, but one thing that stands out to me is we've just had nearly a 3-hour debate on safeguarding procedures around notifications, etc., which has been a body of work done by the partnership, and yet it's not even mentioned in the sort of ongoing responses. So I mean, I agree with what's been said around poverty remaining a key area, but you don't have to be poor to be a paedophile, and you don't have to be in poverty to be a victim of sex offences or failures of safeguarding. So can you give us an assurance that the full report will adequately cover the breadth of work that you've done as a board in detail, is my first question.
Yes, of course, I can give you that assurance. You know, we've talked already about the notification process and some of the things that we've been learning as we go along. So that will also be included in the full annual report as well.
That's really welcome, thank you. And my last question is directed to Jasvinder, it says in here that the annual report is an objective analysis, and we've heard how it's independent. So am I right, therefore, to deduce that as the independent chair, you write the report? And what impact do the other partners have, including the local authority, who you are effectively objectively analysing, have to instruct changes, and has that ever happened?
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. It's actually the report of the Executive Board. It's not my report. And my role is to independently scrutinise the report. And that is what is expected of the National Panel, expect that as well. This is a real opportunity for an independent scrutineer to look at the work of that timescale, to be able to independently scrutinise it and to provide a very objective forward. So that is my intention, and the full report is now completed, and I will have a look at it with my eyes and provide an opinion.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, please.
I'm just looking at the child protection systems there, and I think we're doing fairly well in Leeds compared to some councils and various places around the country. But I think for me is, does the training go to all people, especially on the ground? Like teachers, they'd be probably the most likely people to probably see a child in the first instance. Or the good thing, I think, with schools now, they do have a police presence in each school, and I'd like to say that that is a good thing, because as governors in schools and stuff, children tend to see police now as not to get into trouble with. They're also people you can go and ask things to, and I think that nice face of that police officer within school, they go into, they do different schools and different things, but there is police presence, and I think that's quite good for everybody, parents and children. I think for me as a parent, because I'm speaking as a parent really, that I am so happy with what I've read here today, that at least I know if my children were, or maybe their friends or people that are getting into dangerous situations, at least there is the services there, but we need to put it down. So where do parents get the information from? Maybe a user-friendly area to, if you need to, where to signpost people. And I think that needs to be addressed, especially in a user-friendly area.
I'll just quickly come in on that point. The Leeds Safeguarding Children Partnership website has sections for professionals, for children and young people, and for parents. And some of the key things that we might be learning, especially around sort of child death reviews, where we will use social media to target parents around sort of safety and welfare issues as well. So we realise that the power of social media can also help get some of those messages out straight into people's hands, if you like, through the phones. So we're always trying to expand on how we get those messages out better to children and families.
Chief Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up the point that was made around schools. Yes, we do have presence in a number of schools across the district in Leeds. We have Safer Schools officers where they are part funded by that school with police officers, but then we have aligned PCSOs to all other schools across the district. And I think it is really, really important. There's two examples that I'd just like to feed in to reassure the board around some of the work that's going, and probably comes into the comments that were made around the voice of the child. So a really practical example in the last week is one of my Safer Schools officers was engaged by a child in their school that was asking some quite concerning questions around violence and what the police response to that violence was. The fact that the Safer Schools officer was there was able to engage with that child, disclosed domestic violence and abuse at home, and allowed us to make the necessary referrals and take the necessary positive action in relation to that. So that's one really practical operational example. The other really good example is around the West Yorkshire Police are engaged in and developing a product known as POLED. So POLED is an educational tool written by teachers and developed by West Yorkshire Police and provided free of charge to every school in West Yorkshire. At the moment in Leeds, around 60% of all schools are signed up to that. That's a product that is based around the national curriculum for PSHE, so it tackles a number of issues. But one of the prime drivers within that process is around signposting children and young people into seeking help around abusive relationships, domestic abuse, domestic violence, criminal exploitation, child sexual exploitation, and really positive step forward in the last few days. In that, we've been supported by Leeds City Council in that Deborah Jobson, who's the education safeguarding manager for the district, has just underwritten POLED and written out to schools to say that the situation and the stance of the school should be they should adopt that and that they should provide a reason why they're opting out if they don't want to use the POLED product. So we're hoping to see that 60% registration rise significantly in the coming weeks and months and nearing that 100% registration.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Renshaw, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to ask Phil if he could give me any information on when a child gets spoken to, or there are things, certain factors in that child's play or how that child is acting that causes alarm in schools or anywhere really, and they get referred on, but that child goes quiet, and you relay information about how a child might leave it sort of dormant and it shows up years later. How long are those records kept regarding that child's incident before, because it might be longer than 7 years after that child starts to show any signs of the reaction of what's happened in their earlier days? So I just wonder if you could elaborate on how long that child's records, and is that child kept under any form of observation within the schools?
It's quite a difficult question for me to answer in terms of the details of that, but what we do know is when there is an incident, for example, in primary schools, that the child's records are then passed over to the school that they're moving into. So if there are any concerns, then those transitional arrangements between junior school and primary school should be there, and all teachers should know any issues that previously happened for that child.
Thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Stevenson, you get the final point, and then we'll sum up.
Can I just pick up on the back of that question, that comment there about I think you said it's called POLED. So a chair of governors of a primary school in the inner city was discussing with me recently an issue of where children might be non-attenders, and there's only so much enforcement of attendance officers some schools can do. And so what typically happens is the attendance officer will go to a house, knock on the door, and in his words, the upstairs window will open and the parent will tell them to expletive away, and that's it. And what this school have asked for is a collaboration with the local police, so that when those attendance officers are visiting, the presence of a police officer would probably assist getting access, but also would help pick up instances where there might be safeguarding concerns that wouldn't otherwise be seen because the attendance officer isn't allowed to go in. So in that context, what you've just described, would the POLED system assist with that? And is there any anything you're aware of that might help tackle that front door issue of starting with attendance, for example, as an insight as to why? I'm thinking about that disguised compliance in a way that it's actually sort of, it's very open, it's non-compliance, but then nothing seems to happen when the upstairs window shuts.
Yeah, no, thank you for your points. I think we need to be very careful around a movement into roles and responsibilities and statutory responsibilities of the police. And I certainly wouldn't advocate for the police providing police officers to go to every single education welfare visit. The police are there in cases of serious welfare, serious harm issues, and we have powers that help us around that sort of thing. In terms of POLED, the POLED is a curriculum-based, lesson plan-based product that will hopefully allow confidence to be built with children as they develop through their education, to allow them to understand and recognise behaviour that is maybe out of the norm, or is detriment to their development and well-being, and then create for them a knowledge of support and people that they can go to raise concerns, whether that be a police officer, whether it be a teacher, or someone else that can undertake that role and support the child that's in crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I just wanted to come back on the question from Councillor Ryan, and I suppose just to sort of reiterate and reinforce that if any partner has got a concern about the welfare of a child, then really they need to have that conversation, whether it's with early help practitioners at a local level, whether it's with the early help hubs, or if they have if they think that the child's welfare is at risk, then obviously there's that referral to the front door.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you very much, everybody. And first of all, thank you for the way the debate has been conducted. There's been a lot of issues to get into, and I think we've made good progress. The recommendation is to consider the content of the attached reports, which we've done, and then to determine appropriate next steps, which is the key thing. So I'd like to put a proposal that there are 5 things that I think that have come out of the meeting, and I welcome any further contributions. I note that the notification interim process, in line with option 1, is to be reviewed after 12 months, which is July 2023. So I wonder if it would be useful if this board could get an update, perhaps in September or October, around that. But there are, as I say, there are 5 things I think that have come out of this morning that we really need to look at. I think it's heartening to hear the progress that's been made since we first discussed this issue a year ago. But following on from the comments made, I think one of the key things is around practitioner escalation and getting some further assurance about that, and getting an update to the board. It might be something that a successor board wants to look in more detail at. The second part is the voice of the child, and just getting some assurances for the board that that is being captured within this. I think to me, the biggest thing that's come out of this is making sure, bearing in mind this whole process is about the most serious cases of harm to children and young people. And we've got to try and prevent that. And it's getting that rapid learning, which is happening, shared rapidly to practitioners, and to make sure that actually that's been acted upon. I think the point about jargon is really important, and I think that's perhaps something that needs to be reviewed and brought back to the board, so things are being done in plain English. And the 5th one that I have is around risk assessments and getting some assurance that they are up to date when they're being considered around decision making, and we're not relying on old risk assessments. So they're the 5 things I've captured. I would suggest that perhaps this board would, or the successor board would be looking at an update in September and October with those 5 key things, and an update on the review from the LSCP executive about the interim process for notifications. So I don't know, Julie, or if any of the partners, or Jasvinder, if you've got any comments or that, if anybody else has got anything they wanted to add, or if that seems a sensible approach.
I would agree with the points that you've highlighted there, Councillor Lamb, following on from the discussion that we've had today.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think in terms of the learning share, that the point really is around measuring the impact of the learning. That includes data, qualitative and quantitative. You know, how do that bit piece around that?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is how do we measure that's happening? It's a tricky thing because really what we need to do is measure what didn't happen because of the interventions that took place, and it's difficult to do. But if you're not having to discuss serious cases and whether to notify or not, that tells us we are learning lessons and we are making progress. So I think finding those key indicators are crucial.
The only other thing I would add is working together is being rewritten, and there's a real opportunity to consult on that now, and that all partners and we raise awareness about that, because I think Leeds can influence that, already have, but further.
Kate?
It was actually the same point, so thank you.
Councillor Stevenson?
I had 4 recommendations, of which you've covered 1.5, and Jasmine has covered the other half. So I do think it's important that the local authority formally submit a response to that national consultation, and as a review of working together, and as a formal recommendation of this board. I think that will be supported. I would suggest that we go just a step further on the issue of risk assessments. So whilst I agree with you, Chair, we want an assurance as a scrutiny board that those updates have been made. I think one of the key things to come out, and clearly because it's thematic, is that the way the risk assessments operate is not working, and that the multiple different tools isn't working. So I would suggest the further recommendation is either via the board or via the council that we write to the Department of Education requesting a national review of how those risk assessments are used by agencies, with a view of exploring one uniform system for all agencies. That's not in the control of this council. It's a national government issue that needs to happen, but I think that's what's glaring out of what we've seen today to me, that's what needs to happen national to have some significance. And the final point I made here was that throughout all of this, I've been thinking, how do we know? How do we as elected members, how does the executive board know what's happening? And the only way we know and can question is from what comes out of the child safeguarding practice reviews. And in that context, I'm thinking that whenever a case goes to the ombudsman's report has to go to the executive board for consideration. And I mentioned this in the pre-meeting, but what's been playing on my mind as an elected member and therefore a corporate parent is one of the key findings in the independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Rotherham by Alexis J was she noted that Rotherham's scrutiny board had several meetings where a large amount of time was devoted to individual cases. They refer to Child S serious case review. Now, fair enough, this board's taken a decision today that we don't want to do that as a board. But one of the things that Alexis J found was that even more significant is the apparent lack of effective scrutiny exercised by councillors and executive members. So I think a key recommendation would be, and however they want to do that, would be that where we have child safeguarding practice reviews linked to cases that have been notified nationally, that they should always be referred to the executive board for consideration, because then we have a layer of executive oversight and scrutiny so that councillors, decision makers can say they know what's going on, they know what improvements are being suggested, they're learning because it's formally being reviewed and considered. It's for the executive board whether they do that in a closed session or otherwise, but I think that will be a key recommendation from us today to ensure that there is, and the same way as ombudsman's reports go to executive board, there is a clear proven link that there is oversight, which is the feedback from the Alexis J report, but also aligns with national legislation. So there'll be the further recommendations I'd add, Chair.
Anybody else, anything to add to the next steps we've suggested?
perhaps just to come back on a couple of those points. I'm not sure that we've seen evidence of assessments not working across the board, as perhaps has been described. I haven't seen evidence of, systemic evidence of assessments not working systematically in children and families or across the partnership. So I suppose I just need to respectfully challenge that view, because, and I don't know if other colleagues want to come in, but I haven't seen evidence of that. In relation to the proposal in terms of the executive board, I do wonder whether it would be helpful to have some further advice on that, and specifically some advice from our legal advisors and others.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would just back up what Julie says. I don't recall within this meeting there being specific evidence or conclusions around that risk assessment in the way that it was presented, and I think there is a risk of going down a route that is not evident in the reporting that's been done. So I'd support that. I think as well, the other point I would make is we need to be clear around child safeguarding. There's been a lot of references to child sexual abuse and exploitation in this meeting today, but there are a number of other elements that feed into child safeguarding, and we need to be mindful and aware of that. And I think, again, as an exec board member, I would like to take some further advice in relation to the scrutiny of the reports that are coming back from those national notifications. Thank you.
Yes, I'd just like to add to that as well. I don't think any comparisons, however obliquely done to Rotherham, are at all appropriate or relevant. I don't think there's any evidence that myself and other elected members don't have the level of oversight of children and families that we need to have. In fact, the Ofsted report, which was only a year ago, singled out myself and Tom Reardon for having, in their words, an impressive level of operational detailed knowledge. So I don't think there's any evidence that the oversight and the scrutiny isn't there. We've got a really robust safeguarding partnership. You've seen evidence of that today. You've seen in the report how reflective the partnership is, how open to learning, and how open to external scrutiny and input, including from the national panel. I would support, I don't think anyone has said they would support the recommendation that child safeguarding practice reviews go to exec board. And my view is that there isn't any evidence that there isn't the required scrutiny. Thank you.
Just on risk assessments first, because it is in the report that a thematic approach has come out of this is different agencies using risk assessment processes. That is in the report that we've been presented with. Furthermore, it is written, and Julie knows we've had a conversation offline about this. It is written in some of those reports that was a failure, the different risk the use of different risk assessments. So it is an obvious point, I think, of discussion we've all had, and that's why it's in the report, that the report outlines that staff being aware of how the different processes work is a weakness. That's what's in this report here. I'm merely going a step further to say that one of the problems is that one agency will use the Oasis risk assessment, which might present a medium risk. Another agency might use the matrix system, which might present a high risk. Same individual, two different outcomes. That is clearly a problem. So all our suggestion is that that is looked at, a request that is reviewed, not that a decision is made, but it is reviewed nationally to ensure that those systems are giving the same outcomes across all agencies and that failures don't make in future. So that just to clarify that point, my recommendation came from the discussion we'd had today on the report. And just on the point of it going to executive, nobody can say that the child safeguarding practice reviews have been scrutinised by any elected member, any scrutiny board, any executive member. We have been banned today from doing that. There is no process of scrutiny over those. some people take a view that we shouldn't be allowed to scrutinise, and some people take a view that we should. That's fine, whatever the outcome is. All that I suggest in the recommendation, and the reason I referred to the J review, and I never made comparison, was because the key findings of that nationally significant review found that there weren't evidence processes that the outcomes in each individual serious case review were shared and scrutinised across not just the executive member, but the broader executive board and therefore elected members in general. And it's exactly the same as we do with ombudsman reports. They have to go to the executive board. So my question to anybody who would object to openness, transparency, we've heard those words a lot today. We're open, we're transparent, but we're not going to let you discuss this one. So anyone who has a view that we should be open and transparent in a way, all I'm saying is that documents that are already in the public domain, accessible today for anybody on the Safeguarding Children's Partnership website, formally go to the executive board in some form, in the same way that ombudsman reports do, so that they can be considered, and that is minuted, and therefore it's there for if and I'm sure we never will, but hopefully never will, if we get into trouble in the future, we can say that we do have robust practices, and we go above and beyond, and we're continually improving, and that's part of continual improvement. And Chair, I feel quite strongly on that point. So if we get to it, I will move that we vote on that point, if that's okay on the specific recommendation.
Sorry, I'm not using my mic for Jasvinda, then Councillor Bennett, then Councillor Renshaw.
Sorry, thank you. I'm the independent chair. I'm apolitical. That's the first point to note. My role is to offer scrutiny and challenge, not only to the executive board, but also chief officer groups. And I have to, I would like to echo Councillor Stevenson's points and support them. There is no comparison being made here to Rotherham. And with all due respect to Alexis J, whom I know, no one is comparing Leeds to Rotherham, but her observations are a point of learning. And, you know, openness and scrutiny should be welcomed. And I know you're making reference to a particular case. I'm not making reference to that. But the point is, when things are in the public domain and they're about your city, as an executive board, you should be discussing them if it's a point of learning. That's my view. In terms of the risk assessments, we have presented a report to you today on Appendix 2, on page 29, where we are saying there is some learning to do around different agencies' risk assessments and processes. Nobody is saying it's an issue and it's a problem here in Leeds. What we're saying is there needs to be an improvement. Now, that improvement comes directly out of cases that we have looked at, where we have consistently considered them, and unfortunately, in relation to a very tragic case. So what we're saying is we need to do some work on this, and I fully would support that recommendation. It mustn't be missed.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of points. One is that I just wanted to be really clear, and I'm sure the board's understood this from the discussions today, but safeguarding practice reviews go to a national panel. That's part of the process. So in terms of scrutiny, they're getting scrutiny at the most senior level that they could be scrutinised. They're being scrutinised by the most senior professionals working in children's safeguarding. So to suggest there isn't a lack of scrutiny isn't appropriate. And I think we've demonstrated today our openness and our transparency in the reports we've presented, in our description of the journey we've been on. As Councillor Martin pointed out, we have an independent chair, which isn't a statutory requirement. That's about us wanting to have that external independent scrutiny. So I don't think there's just any evidence that we're not being open and transparent. Yeah, I think that's probably the point that I wanted to make. Yeah, I might come back to it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back into when we were having discussions and the officers were saying what their duties were. And they did say that they're working more collaboratively. They're working off the same system, which Councillor Stevenson has just contradicted and said that they're all working off their own systems. They've quite easily said today that they're working more collaboratively and doing things together. So, you know, going on what Julie said earlier about it's a lifelong learning. It's an ongoing thing. You can't stop learning new things about what's happening to our children. So, you know, I think it's just ongoing and on learning for everybody, for us as well as the scrutiny board.
Yeah, I think. Well,
remember the second point I wanted to make.
Yeah,
but
just
I forgot.
1 second. If I,
okay.
Yeah. So I think you've actually, it probably wasn't your intention. I think you've made Councillor Stevenson's point for him, that the point of this is to keep learning, and to take Julie's point earlier, this work is never done. It's never done. We've got to keep improving.
It did.
Sorry.
It is.
I'll bring you in a minute. So I'm conscious of time as well, so I do want to move things on. So,
sorry, I lost my train of thought halfway through my previous point. I made the point that I wanted to make about the national scrutiny that we get through the national panel, but also, as we've demonstrated today, we disseminate learning, and that's the important thing about the information that comes out of case reviews, not the detail of individual cases, but the learning that comes from them. And we've demonstrated today how that learning is disseminated. You know, it's disseminated from the Safeguarding Executive through the Children and Young People's Partnership that I co-chair with Jasvinder, and then the Safeguarding Unit look at the way they're going to disseminate that out to practitioners through training, through briefings, etc. So we're getting really comprehensive learning. I agree with points Jasvinder's made that we need to really evidence how we're embedding that learning and the difference it's making. But I just don't think there's any evidence that we're not either getting appropriate scrutiny of serious cases or disseminating learning that requires safeguarding practice reviews to go to our executive board. Thank you.
Right, I've got a flurry of hands now. So
very quickly, because it's on that point, I'm not sure that the national panel provide the level of scrutiny that Councillor Venner is referring to. We send them the rapid review. They give us recommendations. They're not scrutinising the case that we have looked at the review advisory group. So just be mindful of what we mean by scrutiny of national panel. They're not looking in depth at a case that has happened in Leeds that has been notified to them. So I just wanted to make that point.
Julie?
Yeah. So I'd just like to come back on a number of points. In terms of scrutiny, the National Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel get a range of information. So at the point when we make a notification, and then that takes us into what's called a rapid review process, and that's where the review advisory group come together. They receive a host of information from all of the agencies who have been involved with that child or family. They then complete a form, a report, records, and they then make a recommendation to the LSCP exec as to whether there should be a national review, a local review, no review, or some other form of learning activity. That comes to the LSCP exec. We have to give a very clear rationale on that form as to why we are making the decision and the recommendation to the national panel. At that point, the national panel do have an opportunity to come back and challenge our decision as to whether we ought to have a child safeguarding practice review, a local review, etc. They can ask us about that, and they can provide additional scrutiny about our rationale. Following on from that, where a decision is taken to undertake a child safeguarding practice review, when that report is produced, that report is sent to the national panel before it is publicised. And again, the national panel will write to give the local authority, the LSCP exec, feedback on the review and on the report. So I just wanted to clarify those points because I think that is very important in terms of the national safety. The other thing I would want to say is just coming back to the report that's been presented today in relation to the learning and the thematic learning. And whilst it's right that we have highlighted some of that thematic learning, it's not right to say that that means that in each of these themes that have been covered in the report that there is systemic failures across the partnership in relation to them. That's not the purpose of the report. The purpose of the report is to highlight areas where we feel there can be further and there should be further learning. It is not to say there is systemic failure. And that's not actually what the reviews, that's not the language or not what the reviews have found. The reviews have found that there is learning to be had, and that learning is being actioned and implemented across the partnership in the way that's been described today, working really closely with police colleagues, health colleagues, and other partners across the city.
Thanks, Julie. Just on the first point, and I think, I don't know, Councillor Stevens doesn't mean me to put words in his mouth, but I think the missing link and what's highlighted in the J report and what Jasvinder has said is, where's the democratic oversight of all of that? You've described a robust process, but nothing in what you described was a democratic oversight of that. I think that's what's being suggested. And what I've put forward is not that we're making a decision right now about how and what that looks like, but that there's time to go away and look at these issues, including the ones Councillor Stevenson's highlighted, and come back to the board in September and October with an update and some comment and some thoughts on how to take this forward, in the spirit of what you said, that this work is never done. We've heard significant progress today, which is really pleasing, but it's about how do we keep doing it better, and I think that's the point that's being.
Just by way of a personal explanation, Chair, just to aid Councillor Renshaw's understanding of the process, it's quite clear in the late item that I put forward explains it, but obviously you said you didn't want the late item to come forward, so you can't see it. But I just want to get a clarification for you. Julie, could you just confirm to us that in terms of the risk assessments used, it is not the case that all agencies use the same risk assessment? It is, for example, the case that public protection officers use the Risk Matrix 2000 and that the probation service use the offender assessment system. Just clarify for the board that it is the case that different assessment tools are used.
I think we're probably talking about a number of different things. So yes, nationally, locally, regionally, there are a number of different assessment tools that can be used to assess different circumstances and that are used by different organisations. I think that's the point that you're making, Councillor Stevenson. I think the point perhaps Councillor Renshaw is making is about the fact that the learning, has been identified and that actually there is work underway across the partnership to deal with the themes that have been highlighted in the report today, whether that's assessments, whether that's professional curiosity and disguised compliance, all of the areas that have been highlighted today are all areas that are being progressed through the partnership work.
I agree entirely, Julie, and that's why my suggestion was, and to be clear, this is not a criticism of the council, it's a criticism of national government, which is why I suggested that we should ask national government to instigate a review into how those risk assessments are used, because our learning here in Leeds has shown from the case that cannot be mentioned that was an issue. And therefore, all I'm saying is we noticed it in here as a learning point, and therefore we should write to national government and say, look, we've got this as a thematic issue. We think that you now need to do a national review into those practices to make sure that countrywide other authorities don't make the same mistakes that have happened here.
Thank you. Just I'm keen to wrap up. But Jill, you had your hand up a couple of minutes ago, and then Kate.
It was just to add in terms of scrutiny that any child safeguarding practice review overview report goes to the executive safeguarding lead for every organisation that's contributed to that review and for sign off. And if the executive lead has concerns, then that will be fed back. Thank you.
Kate, please.
Thanks. Sorry, just on the risk assessments, I just think I need to make the point that there are different risk assessments undertaken by different agencies, organisations for different statutory purposes and functions, but obviously there is crossover. So when social care is doing a risk assessment in order to determine whether or not it's safe for a child or children to live with a particular individual who might have involvement with other agencies, they would obviously necessarily need to look at those risk assessments to inform their own risk assessment, but that risk assessment would have a different purpose. And I think it's about the professionals' understanding and interpretation of that particular risk assessment in relation to their own risk assessment. That's the area where I think there's room for improvement that's been identified. So for me, what we could do is, where we're looking to feed into government about our experience of this review process, that could be one of the things that we could identify, because I think trying to go to national government and say all these different risk assessments, it's not working. I don't think we're going to be in a position to necessarily influence, because they relate to statutory functions and purposes. They've got, they're different tools for different end, outcomes. So it's about maybe feeding into the learning, into the update of the working together to safeguard children, to see if there's a way that we can influence that in terms of assisting professionals to understand and interpret other risk assessments in order to improve their own assessment when they're making safeguarding decisions about children. And on the other point, I think it would certainly be helpful to take some more advice in relation to that. I think it would be helpful if that could be looked at when we come back and review this in the autumn. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and then Councillor Carter, and then we need to wind up then, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I was just mindful of the Josh McAllister review. So the current, the review that's been undertaken nationally into children's social care. I referenced it earlier in the meeting in terms of the recommendations there to have a multi-agency approach to service delivery, both in relation to child protection and early help. That recommendation really, I suppose, arises around, the need, again, to look at how partner agencies share information, share intelligence, share data, how they come together to do that at a local level. So actually, I think in some ways, the conversation that we have had today around information sharing, around the use of assessments, I'm really confident that that will be a feature of discussions locally as we begin to think, what does our family help service look like in Leeds? What does our child protection service look like in Leeds? In terms of a multidisciplinary, a much closer multidisciplinary delivery. And equally, I think this conversation, as I've said, in terms of information sharing, the use of assessments, will be something that is looked at nationally. There's a national implementation board who are overseeing the implementation of the review. They're actually due to have their meeting in Leeds tomorrow, and they're meeting with, albeit if it happens in terms of the snow, but the plan is that they will be meeting with professionals across the partnership, both in terms of early help and also our statutory intervention. So again, these conversations about multi-agency working, what does that mean in terms of information sharing, in terms of assessments, are conversations that are very live at the moment nationally as it stands.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lamb. It was just really a few observations, really, and I'm very conscious that I'm not here, I'm not in attendance today as a legal advisor to the committee as such. I'm here in my role as the legal advisor to the LSCP. But I just wanted to make a couple of, or three observations, if I may, in relation to those recommendations. And firstly, just to confirm that the consultation window on working together hasn't opened yet. So of course that recommendation perhaps should be subject to the consultation window opening. Just wanted to clarify that the child safeguarding practice review process is set out in a legislative framework. The Children Act 2004 as amended. And when ombudsman reports come to the executive board, it's because usually there's been a recommendation made to the council. And so that's not, I don't think, a like for like comparison in this situation. And then in relation to just the role of this committee and the fact that you are very much entitled to scrutinise whatever decision-making processes you think it's appropriate to scrutinise. So I would say when a child safeguarding practice review comes to this board, what is it that you are scrutinising? What decision-making are you scrutinising, rather than it just being another level of, quality assurance of the report itself, which you've heard goes through so many other processes before it gets to the final position of publication
And of course, it goes to the national panel at that point. And within that legislative framework, there wasn't inbuilt that democratic involvement, as there may well be in other processes.
Okay, thanks. So I think the proposal stands, but my 5 is expanded to 7. So we've got the practitioner escalation, voice of the child, rapid learning sharing, looking at jargon, making sure risk assessments are up to date, and looking at whether they can be made more consistent across practitioners and practices. Where does the democratic oversight come into the serious case reviews and learning, and then the working together contribution when that window opens, that we think the council should be contributing to that. Have I missed anything?
Yes, Chair. I formally moved that the CSPRs be referred to Executive Board for their consideration. I formally moved that, so.
Okay, and well, my suggestion is that that comes back in September, October with as something to explore. Or you wanted the board to make a?
I did formally move it, so if somebody's willing to second, then it has to go to a vote by procedural rules, Chair.
Okay, fine. Well, that's been moved and seconded. So those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Okay. Well, unfortunately, once a vote's done and put, that's that. I would, yeah. I mean, that should the vote's clearly
that's fine, Chair. So subject to 16.5 of Council Procedure Rules, please could I require that my vote in favour is formally recorded in the minutes?
Yeah.
Mine also.
Yeah. Right. Now, I'd still recommend that comes back to us in September or October to look around how we can establish some democratic oversight. So while this is not made today, I still think it's something that we need to look at and explore. And again, it's got national significance. So is everyone in agreement with what we've set out? Angela, do you just want to summarise, rather than my clumsy way, your more efficient way of what we've agreed?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you said, those 5 points.
7 now.
Yeah, that you've already given. I think on the last part, and obviously we record that in the minutes. But as you say, Chair, it's picking up about the querying about the democratic accountability element as well, and that coming back as part of an update report that we're looking to schedule about September, October time, being mindful again that we do sort of relate this to when the working together consultation is open, but also the findings of that too. So yeah, just to echo what you've just said, Chair.
Okay. So is everyone happy with that approach for moving forward? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, right. So that's the end of item 7. We've got 2 items to go, which should be very quick. But thank you to everybody who's contributed. Really grateful for the amount of time you've given us today, and really heartening to hear the progress that's made. And we'll look forward to hearing from you again in due course. So item 8 is the work schedule, which I'll hand over to Angela.
Thank you, Chair. So this report relates to the latest work schedule, with the latest version set out in Appendix 1 for members' consideration. A key point to note within the report is that it is being proposed that the board defers receiving an update report on the Youth Justice Plan and the Future in Mind strategy until the new municipal year, and the reasons for this are set out in paragraph 6 of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, Councillor Martin. Yep.
Thank you. Just quickly, in response to the government's proposed changes in people trafficking law, where traffic people will be exempt from modern slavery legislation, I'd like to propose that this board look at how this would affect trafficked children, and also including writing to Suella Braverman to ask for clarification on how it might affect those trafficked children.
The legislation, draft legislation sets out it doesn't include people under 18, so that answers your question.
Yeah, but those people under 18 have parents.
Okay, right. Rather than having a debate on this now, given we only have one meeting of the municipal year and we've got to defer things to the next one, I would suggest that that's something to put to the first meeting of the successor board, for sort of something that could be considered next year if you wanted to do that. So, okay, item 9 is the date and time of the next meeting, which is Wednesday, the 29th of March at 10 with a pre-meeting at 9:45. I'll try and keep it a bit more on track than I have this time, but important things to discuss. And I'm very grateful to everybody for your contributions. So see you next time. Thank you.